Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special 1 versus 5i live event. My name is Taylor Hudak, and I'm joined with my co-host of the evening, Christy Doff. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special. So we do want to make sure that you guys can hear us, so let us know in the chat before we get started and that you can see everything. Yeah, so let us know if you guys can hear us.
Yeah, let us
also do share this on social media. Make sure you use the hashtag 1 versus 5i. Tonight is going to be a really interesting evening, very exciting. Of course, we haven't had a live event for the past couple weeks, so tonight will be a really special one for you guys. All right, everybody can hear us.
Great.
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us. So to start off, my name is Taylor Hudak, and I am the spokesperson for Kiwi journalist Suzie Dawson's 1 versus 5i campaign.
Good evening. I'm Christy Doff. I am the spokesperson for Unity for J campaign, which was co-founded by Suzie Dawson.
Now, Suzie is an investigative journalist and activist from Auckland, New Zealand, whose work has taken on some of the world's most powerful actors, including the Western intelligence agencies known as the Five Eyes.
Over the years, Suzie's work has been shared by countless high-profile people, including Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
And due to her journalism and activism, Suzie was extensively targeted in her home country of New Zealand.
This targeting increased in severity over time and even included threats on her life.
And due to the threat she was facing, Suzie left her home country and traveled across the world to Berlin, Germany, but she continued to be targeted there.
So eventually, Suzie moved to Moscow, Russia, where she was finally safe from being targeted, and she applied for temporary asylum.
As time progressed, Suzie learned more about the targeting of her and gathered more corroborating evidence.
Now, in September of 2019, Suzie reapplied for asylum in Russia, presenting this new evidence along with her application.
Unfortunately, Suzie's application was declined, and although the decision acknowledged receipt of the new documentation, it did not reference or address the content of that evidence.
Now, Suzie's lawyers are appealing this decision on a number of grounds, including failure to take that new evidence into account.
So the fact is, Suzie needs asylum. She needs to be protected from the powerful agencies who want to harm her for her work.
But she may not be able to get the protection she needs without increasing public awareness about her situation.
So Suzie's attorneys have recommended that she make some of the evidence of her case public for everyone to see and evaluate.
And now everyone can study this evidence. It will be clear that yes, Suzie was severely targeted, and that targeting was a direct response to her lawful and democratic activism. And now she deserves to be protected from those who want to harm her.
So that is why a team of activists have put together protectsuzie.com, a brand new website full of never before seen evidence that obliterates the targeted smears and misinformation campaigns that have been circulated about Suzie. The site contains many resources for understanding Suzie's case and helping us to protect her and her children and secure them a safe place to live going forward.
And tonight, Taylor and I are inviting you to be part of that effort. Read the site, share the content, and sign the open letter calling for Suzie and her children to be protected from these horrible state-sponsored attacks that she's already been subjected to.
Now, high-profile supporters of Suzie, including Christine Assange, mother of Julian Assange, internet entrepreneur Kim Dotcom, CIA torture whistleblower John Kiriakou, and international human rights attorney Craig Tuck have already supplied letters of testimony endorsing her claims and requesting that she be protected.
And these letters are now published for the first time ever at protectsuzie.com, and we are going to read through them for you now.
So right now, I'm going to be reading to you all the letter of testimony from internet entrepreneur Kim Dotcom. I, Kim Dotcom, businessman of Queenstown, New Zealand, affirm One, I am the subject of an indictment for alleged copyright infringement brought by the United States government against me. I suspect that one of the reasons why I have been indicted with novel charges was my support for WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. I have been defending myself and my family for the last 7 years. My case is currently before the Supreme Court in New Zealand. I have been the subject of unlawful acts of US government agencies supported and facilitated by the New Zealand police and the security apparatus in New Zealand. I know Suzette Marie Dawson, who has been closely involved in the political party that I have founded in New Zealand, the Internet Party of New Zealand, and in defense and support of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden. Numerous people have been directly and indirectly affected by the US and New Zealand operations against me and others. Some of the methods of extrajudicial targeting Ms. Dawson has reported experiencing reflect my own. In December 2018, an official State Services Commission report confirmed that multiple New Zealand government agencies were involved in engaging spies to target multiple members of political groups, including associates of our political party. Domestic and international agencies, intelligence agencies involved in the political persecution of New Zealand residents and citizens for their support of WikiLeaks operate on New Zealand soil with impunity, and meaningful redress is either extremely difficult, if not impossible, to obtain. Queenstown, the 22nd of July, 2019, kim.com.
All right, and I am going to share my screen here, and we will go through Christine Assange's testimony. I, Christine Ann Assange, mother of New South Wales, Australia, affirm. I am the mother of Julian Paul Assange, founder and former editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, who is currently detained in the United Kingdom. My son has been brutally politically persecuted by the United States government and security apparatus, as well as that of the United Kingdom, Sweden, Australia, and their allies, for my son's journalism, exposing war crimes and corruption. I have known and worked with journalist Suzie Dawson for 18 months. Ms. Dawson is an investigative journalist who has courageously published articles revealing the facts of the political persecution of my son. Her work has been publicly endorsed by my son and WikiLeaks on a number of occasions. I know her to be a courageous person of scrupulous integrity and honesty. In 2018, Ms. Dawson founded Unity for J, the global support campaign aggregating and amplifying information, articles, resources, interviews, and actions globally to protect and free my son. The campaign operates across multiple platforms and has brought together nearly 100 prominent journalists, editors, lawyers, human rights experts, politicians, and other credible experts from across the world to speak out in support of my son. It has become a powerful voice for his protection and freedom. Anyone connected with the work of my son and WikiLeaks at the level of Ms. Dawson is a person of interest to the security services and at high risk of significant punishment for the aid and support and knowledge that she has provided. Numerous other associates of WikiLeaks who I know and are in a similar position to Ms. Dawson, connected to the work of my son and others, have been surveilled, imprisoned and pursued, attacked, subjected to arbitrary arrest and detentions, intimidation and harassment, or have had to flee their home countries to live in exile. Increasingly, those associated with WikiLeaks, including journalists and others defending it, and my son, have become targets of the US WikiLeaks grand jury. I am very concerned that because of Ms. Dawson's high profile in this area, she is also at risk from this political persecution. And this was affirmed on July 23rd, 2019.
And next, I will be reading for you all John Kiriaku's letter. I'm going to share the screen this time to make it a little bit more easy to follow along. And I'm going to try to figure out exactly how to do that. Okay. Well, to keep everything on track, I'm just going to read for you guys. John C. Kiriakou, September 2nd, 2019, to whom it may concern. I am a professional associate of Suzie Dawson. She is an internationally recognized high-profile advocate of Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and the principle of governmental transparency and accountability. I am certain that Suzie's activism has brought her to the attention of federal prosecutors in the United States and specifically in the Eastern District of Virginia, where Julian Assange has been charged with espionage for practicing journalism. I have personal experience in the Eastern District of Virginia. I want to convey in no uncertain terms that, if indicted, Suzie Dawson could not possibly receive a fair hearing in this court. The Eastern District is known as the Espionage Court because no national security defendant has ever won a case there. The district is home to the CIA, the Department of Defense, the FBI Academy, and literally hundreds of intelligence community and defense contractors. It is the employees of these organizations who would make up a jury there. Because of the nature of her work, Suzie has undoubtedly come to the attention of the federal grand jury working on Julian Assange's case. The grand jury system in the United States is patently unjust. Its hearings are held in secret. The target of the investigation has no idea that it is taking place, and there is literally no opportunity for a target or potential target to defend him or herself. Suzie should not be made to face such a system. It is the antithesis of justice, freedom, and fairness. Furthermore, if Suzie were to leave Russia and return to New Zealand, she could face immediate extradition to the United States and the Eastern District of Virginia. Again, this would not be justice. It would be doing the bidding of the United States. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, John C. Kiriakou.
So countless other supporters of Suzie will join in signing their endorsement in the coming weeks, and we are asking as many people as possible to now sign their names in support.
So if you all go to, I'm going to try to show this for you guys on the screen. If somebody could tell me how to screen share.
So I can pull it up if you want.
Pull it up. Okay.
We've got it here.
Okay, so all you need to do is go to protectsuzie.com, the brand new website that was just created. And to sign a letter, you simply click the, well, before we do that, I think we should probably read the letter.
Yeah. So we, the undersigned, have reviewed the overwhelming evidence of New Zealand journalist Suzie Dawson's political persecution as posted on this website and call on international bodies, NGOs, to step up and advocate for the protection of Suzie and her family from this persecution. It is unacceptable that a young mother and her children have been subjected to the extreme psychological distress after years of targeting and harassment by the very entities Suzie held to account through her journalistic work and activism. Suzie and her children deserve, at the very least, to live free of this persistent abuse. Due to a combination of discrimination based on Suzie's country of origin and her association with other high-value targets, neglect, and lack of resource, Suzie and her family are effectively in limbo and require urgent intervention from appropriate parties in order to resolve their situation in a way that reinforces and is consistent with their human rights. Suzie Dawson is not and never has been a threat to the public, but rather a peaceful, pro-democratic activist whose journalistic work has been published on 3 continents in multiple languages and is of great benefit to the public. We therefore exhort you to provide Suzie Dawson and her young family the support and advocacy necessary to ensure that they are protected from the powerful entities that have demonstrated repeatedly that they will stop at nothing to harm her.
All right, so we are calling upon everybody to sign this open letter, and we will talk you through exactly how to do that. Christy, since your screen's already up, if you don't mind going through it, and you could put my name in there for me. So to sign the letter, make sure you guys go to protectsuzie.com. Simply just click the button labeled Add My Signature.
Since I've already signed it, it's not going to let me do it again,
Okay.
But it's pretty simple. You're just clicking here, adding your name and email address to confirm. And
yeah, Right. And again, this open letter will be used to petition international bodies and NGOs to rally support for Suzie and her family. So do make sure that you check this out on the new website and that you do sign to support her.
And of course, there are other ways that you can help Suzie right now. Much of the disinformation that has been circulated about Suzie to date has been expressed with the intention of dissuading people from supporting Suzie's 1 versus 5i campaign.
And that campaign will empower Suzie to take legal action against her persecutors, creating an important legal precedent for the rights of citizens worldwide.
Despite the despicable efforts to sabotage Suzie's legal campaign, brave supporters have already been donating nonetheless, and the first leg of it is already 35% funded. And we need your help to push that even closer to her goal.
Absolutely. So you can donate at 1versus5i.com/donate. That is the number 1, the letters VS, the number 5, the letter I. Or you can also go to protectsuzie.com/donate. Doing so really takes an important stand against the abusive powers that have been misspending public dollars in order to persecute this brave journalist and her family.
So, in Suzie's work, she's learned from and has been mentored by some of the best journalists and activists in the world. But she's also fostered and supported many upcoming activists, including Taylor and myself. Taylor, why don't you take a moment and just talk about how you met Suzie and what contributions knowing her has made to your activism?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it all started with my connection and friendship with you, Christy. I created Action for Assange alongside Andrew Smith, and we just became very involved. We interviewed Christy for our very first vigil, actually, and then we liked her so much and we thought she'd be a great fit. So she joined us along with Steve Poikonen of Slow News Day Show. So, Christy obviously has worked very closely with Suzie through Unity4J. And then I found out through Christy and just, social media that Suzie was launching the 1 versus 5i campaign. And I really wanted to get involved because it was in line with values and certain issues that I really cared deeply about. And I always looked up to Suzie and continue to because she's a fantastic journalist and activist, and I really admire her work. So I began working on that campaign. And then over time, I just continued to, create videos and do the vigils. And Suzie reached out to me about potentially being the spokesperson for the campaign. And I, of course, was extremely honored to be thought of as somebody that could potentially do this. So I gave it my all and I was able to fulfill that position. And while doing so, I have been provided with wonderful, wonderful advice from Suzie. She has taken her time to help me in my own journalistic work, as well as representing this campaign and being a voice for this campaign. I have learned so many even life lessons from her, just about this world of activism, in addition to the education that she provides to everybody about the intelligence agencies and the powers at hand. And I am very, very grateful that she takes the time to work with me and that she has taken the time to mentor me. I consider myself really, really lucky that I've had the opportunity. So, Christy, why don't you share with us how you came to know Suzie? I kind of explained it a little bit, but if you want to talk about it in your own words, and then how she has impacted you in your own work.
Yeah, so I met Suzie through Unity4J, and I have told the story of how I joined Unity4J before, but really Unity4J gave me a venue to be involved with a story that I had been following on and off for years, and that is the story of Julian Assange and what he was going through. I felt because I was somebody in middle America that there was no way, I wasn't a journalist, there's no way I was going to make any impact in helping or anything I could do. And so once Unity4J formed and I started, I used Twitter as the way to get my news, and I started seeing posts and started following Unity4J. They started calling out for volunteers. I signed up on the Discord. I volunteered for the Twitter team. And it really took off from there. And I think one of my first interactions with Suzie was we used to have these weekly, if not multiple times per week, WikiBee sessions, these working sessions with all the volunteers. And they were amazing, an amazing way to really form friendships and work together in real time. Many of us are scattered across the world and different time zones. And I think I made a comment in the chat, and Suzie kind of called me out. She singled me out, and she complimented my work. And it was just, I was really inspired by her. And so the fact that she took notice of me and was noticing the work I was putting in for Unity for J meant a lot. Um, and I slowly kind of worked my way up through Unity for J and did anything and everything I could to participate and help. Eventually, Suzie did step back away from Unity for J for health reasons. And so, kind of in that transition, I found myself helping more with the press releases and kind of becoming the unofficial spokesperson for the movement. And even though Suzie had to take a step back, she was always very helpful. She really took me under her wing and supported me as an activist and as a woman, and really was always there with any advice and any help. And I really owe a lot of how I've shaped as an activist to her and to her dedication to helping activists. And she taught me really that's what activism is about learning from others and then helping the next people up, and just to kind of keep that cycle of learning. And so I'm very grateful to Suzie. I was honored to be asked to work on One versus 5i as we were developing the campaign and continuing work with Unity for J. And because of Unity for J, I was asked to be on Taylor and Andrew's first live stream. And now we are in our, I believe, our 6th month of weekly vigils with Action for Assange. And we are continuing the work of the vigils that Unity for J started. And we just keep evolving and finding new ways that we can support Julian.
Yeah, without a doubt, Suzie has a very unique ability to empower women and unite women activists.
Yes.
She has an incredible ability to do that. Of course, with any activist, she is able to do that, but specifically with really getting women to work together and uplift all of us is something that she is very skilled at, in addition to her fantastic journalistic work that we all look up to and really appreciate. So with all this being said, we are going to be taking a short break. So do make sure that you guys stick with us, and we will be back. And we have some really special guests that will be joining us. You don't want to miss it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So like I was saying before the break, it really helps to hear from those who know Suzie personally. And of course, we will be having a variety of guests on the stream who will be sharing their experiences with you all.
But first we want to take you through some of the other key information that we've talked about that's going to be presented on this new protectsuzie.com website. And it's with a great honor, we'd like to introduce Kiwi journalist Suzie Dawson. Suzie, welcome to the stream.
Hey, you girls, thank you so much for being here tonight and for all of your super kind and lovely words. And thank you to everybody who has showed up to the stream. I really, really appreciate it. And everybody who's live tweeting. There is a new account now. It's at Protect Suzie. So if you follow that on Twitter, that will give you the most relevant and recent updates about this new campaign that's been launched. Hi, everyone. Thank you to everyone saying hello to me. I see you in chat. So my role tonight is I'm going to take you through the rest of the new evidence that is presented on the new protectsuzie.com website. Journalism has been the experience of having total strangers, many of whom I don't know, have never spoken to in my life, making all kinds of bizarre claims about me. And so I've kept quiet about a lot of those smears for quite a long time, but I decided that tonight my key message is: you may like me, you may love me, you may think I'm great, you may hate me, you may not like me, you might think I'm terrible, but you cannot deny what has happened to me. There is a phenomenal amount of evidence. And so this new website, protectsuzie.com, really obliterates the misinformation and the smears that have been circulated about me. And it makes the case very clearly that my human rights have been violated time and time again by agencies who have a long track record of violating the rights of journalists and of activists. So bear with me 1 second, and I'm going to screen share for you, and I'm going to take you through some of the work that I've done for this website in the last couple of weeks. Now, it's a phenomenal amount of content. There's a lot there to work through, but I'm going to try and give you a little synopsis, so bear with me. So here we are. This is the protectsuzie.com website, which hopefully you can all see right now on the stream. The part that you will see at the top there, there's a lovely explainer video from Christy and Taylor introducing the campaign to people. And then there's a short little blurb, which I won't bother reading through, just giving the TLDR of my situation and who I am. But what I really want to talk you through is this part, which is the timelines. So basically what I decided to do is, I feel like for a very large number of years now, I've been trying to explain in narrative form my experiences and what I've gone through. But I wanted to, for the first time ever, approach it from an analytical standpoint, a statistical analytical standpoint. So I did what I do best, which is investigative journalism. And I went back through my entire social media history on all platforms, all of my blogs, every article I've ever written, every movement I've ever worked on, every issue, all the activism I've been involved in. And I have graphed it all. I've systematically graphed it so that in single views, people can see what it is that I've actually done and what I've experienced and what I've been through. So one of the pieces of misinformation that's circulated about me quite regularly is there are those who claim totally erroneously that I never did anything when I was in New Zealand. I didn't do anything of significance. So the first of the 4 timelines that I've prepared and now published is this timeline that is specifically about exactly what I did in New Zealand before I went into exile. So you see here, first timeline, Suzie's journalism and activism from 2011 to 2019. I'll just full screen that. Right, so what I've done is I've taken this timeline. 2011 was the very first year that I got involved in activism and journalism during the Occupy movement in New Zealand. And obviously 2019 is where we're at right now. 2015 in January is when I had to leave New Zealand and went into exile. So what I've done is I've mapped out here all of the movements and issues that I was involved in. And then I've created this little key at the bottom so that you can see what each of those issues or movements was. And you can see this like cascade effect here. You can see that in 2011, at the end of 2011, I was just involved in Occupy. And then I was involved in like 1 or 2 other things, and then 3 or 4 or 5. And you can see that by the point that I was actually having really serious threats on my life and then leaving the country, I was involved in a deluge, literally, of movements and major activism events in New Zealand. So you can map those numbered and coloured bars against the key here. And then there's been some contention about what exactly it is that I've done for each issue or each movement. So I've created these tables to show you precisely what it is that I did for each of them. So if it's a hashtag that I founded, you can see here that I'm the founder and organizer of the movement. If I created the hashtag, then that's marked as well. If I just promoted the issues, that's marked. If I actually was covering live events and protest actions on the ground, you can see that there. If I did long-form investigative journalism about the topic, you can see it. And if I produced photo and video content, you can see that as well. So I've done that mapped that for everything that I was involved in New Zealand. And then I have gone through and systematically sourced all of it. So you'll see dozens and dozens of source links on these descriptions about each movement and each thing that I was involved in. And those source links, when you click them, lead to my live tweets, my photos, my videos, my interviews of various people involved in various movements, my long-form investigative journalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like here you can see I live tweeted from the ground, I shot live video, I blogged about the events, et cetera, et cetera. So I've created this really thorough resource so that people can go back through my entire archive of work and they can see for themselves exactly what my role was in each movement that I was involved in, and then they can see my related work and content that I produced in the course of my participation in those movements. So, and I'll just say that that's not actually everything I did. I just picked the ones that I considered to be the most significant, or where I'd produced a significant amount of content. So that first timeline should, someone says Suzie is like an intel agency for the world. You know, Julian said that about WikiLeaks. Julian said WikiLeaks is the intelligence agency of the people. So that's pretty much one of the greatest compliments that you can give me. So anyways, that first timeline just completely obliterates this notion that I didn't actually do anything in New Zealand prior to going into exile. And then that leads me to the second timeline. The second timeline, which I'm just sharing now, the second timeline is all of the incidences of targeting that I experienced across that period of time. So what I've done is I've grayed out, bear with me while I just full screen again. So I've taken that activism timeline from the first one that we just discussed. I've grayed it out a bit so it's there in the background. And then I've gone through all of my social media posts and all the photographs and videos and everything that I have, all the evidence that I have. And I've mapped the specific incidences of targeting and the different types of targeting that I experienced on the exact timeline that I experienced it, right down to the month and to the day that I experienced the different things. And then I have a little key here as well. So you can see everything I experienced in New Zealand that drove me into exile. And then you can also see the types of targeting that I've experienced as I traveled across the world and since I have been living in exile, which is obviously, thank God, a lot less than when I was in New Zealand. But because these are all time and date specific, as you'll see when we get down into the sourcing, this has been meticulously placed on the timelines. I was really careful about the dating of each thing, making sure it was accurate to the source material. It's very abundantly clear that the escalation and the targeting of me correlates directly to my increased participation and production of content in activism and journalism in New Zealand. And also, it's really important. It was actually Christine Assange who pointed out to me. She said, well, were you ever targeted before you were a journalist or before you're involved in activism? And I said, no, I haven't. I never experienced anything at all untoward prior to getting involved in journalism and activism. So that's why it says here, no known targeting pre-October 2011, because there was literally nothing until I started producing content related to activism. So then this little key tells you what each of those symbols means in the above timeline. And then I have, once again, meticulously sourced absolutely everything that happened to me. So again, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of links to pieces of evidence relating to the different things that I experienced. For example, I was being harassed by police inspectors at my house who were showing up unannounced. You can see my posts about it as it was happening. They were demanding to question me on the pretext of other unrelated investigations, like unrelated to journalism and activism. I hired the top criminal defence attorney for counter-terrorism cases in New Zealand, Barrister Jeremy Bioletti. He got involved and all of a sudden the police didn't want to talk to me anymore and backed off. It's just one of hundreds of examples. I mean, it would take me hours to sit here and read through this all for you. So if you're particularly interested in everything that I experienced, then all the relevant information is here for you. There's photographs of my mail being tampered with and all kinds of different stuff here. I mean, like just text sabotage alone, there's all the different examples of my devices and computers being interfered with, my communications being interfered with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you click on these, you'll find that everything is timestamped. So you can see like what day, what month, what year that I was experiencing it and reporting experiencing it. And it goes all the way through. I mean, like helicopters, it was so funny when I put this in, I'm thinking like this, even to me, this sounds nuts, right? Like it sounds nuts for someone to be harassed by helicopters, except that I have live video of the helicopters, literally. So I'm like, okay, well, since we have video of it happening, I'm kind of honor bound to actually include it. So you'll see everything is absolutely thoroughly referenced and sourced all the way through. So on and so forth, all the incidences of my car being tampered with, et cetera, entrapment, threats, email threats, death threats, the whole 9 yards, everything is there. Okay, so I think that definitely obliterates the idea that nothing ever happened to me in New Zealand, because that's the other thing. First of all, I hear I never did anything in New Zealand, and then I hear nothing was ever done to me in New Zealand. So I think we have completely dispensed with those falsehoods. So that leads me to now the third timeline that I've prepared, and that is my connections to known targets of the intelligence agencies. So these are people who it's already in the public record are known targets of the agencies. It's indisputable that they are targets. So what I did is I went back and I checked out like when was the first time that I was in communication with these targets, and I've placed it onto the timeline, and I've superimposed it over the previous timeline so that you can see how they match up. For example, in 2011, I was in DM communications actually about the targeting of my media team with Birgitta Johnsdottir, who was then a Pirate Party politician in Iceland who had worked very closely with Julian, and she is a known target of the WikiLeaks grand jury. She's had subpoenas of her social media information. My very DMs with her from 2011 will be in the hands of authorities, guaranteed. Same as my communications in 2012 with Kim.com, etc., etc., etc. And again, you see, as I become connected to more known targets and more known targeted organizations, it matches up against the increasing attacks and harassment and targeting of me that I was experiencing. And I point out that 2014 was the first time that WikiLeaks started retweeting my content, and they retweeted it every year going forward from that point. 2017 was when Julian and I first started working together directly. So then I've broken it down in a little bit more detail, each of those known targets of intelligence agencies who I was in communication with, and the known targeted organizations that I have had communications and associations with as well. Okay, so basically, even if I never had been targeted and I never had done any work that I did do in New Zealand, just the fact that I have been associated with, by one degree of separation, those known targets of the intelligence agencies in and of itself qualifies me as a person of interest from their perspective. So then there was one more thing that was really important for me to map out on a timeline for you guys and girls, and that was the legislative environment in New Zealand, specifically relating to counterterrorism operations and pertaining to the targeting of citizens of New Zealand. So you'll see here the evolution of New Zealand security legislation from 2011 to 2019. Now, this should really scare the crap out of everyone, but particularly out of New Zealand citizens. Every single year from 2012 to 2020, my government has tabled and passed new Orwellian, oppressive legislation that better enables them to target individuals in New Zealand. So I've put what those pieces of legislation are, and then I've put a little key describing the types of things that each of those pieces of legislation then allowed the government to supposedly legally do to us. And if you read through it, it is literally an Orwellian nightmare. And this is obviously on this timeline, what I'm demonstrating is that this deluge of legislation is being passed in tandem to the targeting experiences that I and others had in New Zealand and beyond. And then, just to make sure that you guys know my research is legit, I have gone through and referenced all of it. So I've linked to the actual legislation on the official government website. I've linked to professional analyses of each of the bills and acts that have been passed in New Zealand. And then for good measure, I've also thrown in some mainstream media links as well, so that you can check out what the media is saying about it versus what the legal experts say about it versus what the actual legislation itself says. So altogether, I think those four timelines put paid to a lot of the criticism that I've faced and a lot of the smears and the disinformation that has been circulated about me. But more importantly, it raises a pretty massive alarm about what has actually been going on in New Zealand at a governmental level and what dangers everybody in New Zealand and in the Five Eyes, because the Five Eyes has various versions of this legislation that have been passed. For example, the 2013 GCSB bill in New Zealand became the Aussie Data Retention Act, the UK IP bill, the C51 changes in Canada, the USA Freedom Act. So this has snowballed really around the Western world. This is not just about New Zealand, and it's not just about me as one target being targeted. It's this legislative environment that is being inflicted upon all of, particularly the English-speaking countries, but also a lot, huge, vast swaths of Western Europe and other places around the world. Anyone that's connected to the global network of the Western intelligence agencies. So let's see, was there anything else on the site that I particularly want to take you through? I think the girls did a great job of taking you through. They read you the open letter. You saw the evidence from Kim and from Christine Assange and from John Kiriakou. There's also some from my lawyers that are yet to go up just because they haven't been translated yet, because they were actually filed in Russian here and directly with the immigration department. I guess the one other thing that I would like to show you is the background information. So we decided to do as much work for the journalists as we can in terms of trying to get them to cover what's actually been happening to myself and my family by providing them with a very large amount of publicly available background information. So you'll see here on the website, there's a section called Background, and there's an embedded PDF, and that PDF has got archive links for about 100 mainstream articles which relate to activities of spy agencies, private investigation / security companies, government activities, etc., in New Zealand across the same time period of 2011 through 2020. So if you want to get a good grasp on what's actually been going on there and you want supporting information, there is a ton of info and resources for you right there. So we're intending to expand the site. There's actually a large number of other documents that I have that we may prepare for release in the coming weeks and months. But I think that this site definitely lays to rest once and for all this issue of whether or not I was targeted and whether or not my work is of significance. Someone has just said in capital letters, "Oh my God, Suzie, this is epic." Thank you. I really appreciate it. A ton of work went into the site from a lot of people. Certainly I put my hours in myself, but a lot of people helped me to do this, especially Joe, the tech director for Internet Party, has been an amazing help. Kitty Hundle has been an absolutely incredible help to me. She has been with me every step of the way. Christy and Taylor are doing so much work fronting this campaign, and I deeply appreciate them for that. We have other people who should remain nameless who've signed on to manage outreach and social media for this campaign as well. We've had Kimber doing just amazing graphic work like she always does. And this is just the start of something big. So I really appreciate everybody coming together to do this. It's of vital importance to me, because if I don't have somewhere safe to live for myself and my children, then I am not going to be able to continue the investigations that I do into these agencies and the work that I do both in long form investigative journalism and in video. So I do want to continue that work. I have a long list of things that I want to get into. I want to finish the Decipher You series. I've still got 1,000 Snowden files that I want to analyze live online. I have a bunch of initiatives. So you guys keeping me safe and keeping me strong means that I will continue to be able to produce content and produce work. So if you don't believe in statistical analysis and exhaustive sourcing, and you don't believe in what I say about what has happened to me, well, we have got something for you. We tracked down one of my fellow media team members in New Zealand. Her name is Lynn Nye. She is one of the core team from Occupy Auckland that worked with me on a daily basis right up until I left New Zealand and went into exile. And we have managed to interview her. We've got an amazing interview with her. It's also being published on our website. But now we are going to play it for you. And for the first time ever, you are going to get to hear from her. She's gone on record in print in 2016 about our experiences in a much shorter interview. But this is the first time that you can actually hear directly from somebody who worked alongside me through all of these events that I've been talking about all this time. So please stick with us for that interview. There's also bits of evidence, and all of my original like protest footage and photos are peppered throughout the interview as well. And then after that, we're going to move on to some guests. I hope I haven't just stolen your hosting privileges, Christy and Taylor. If you guys got anything you want to say before we play that video.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming on and doing this stream, and to let everybody know that, you know, it is imperative that you check out these timelines. I mean, it really breaks it down, and it's important to see the exact timing of everything. And it's very interesting and also very educational too. It helps you learn how these agencies work, in addition to the previous teach-ins that were held for the 1 versus 5I campaign. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Lynn as well. Again, we'll be playing that video for you guys right now, actually. And then we have more guests tonight, very special guests, who will also be able to speak to you about their associations with Suzie and working relationships with her.
The first time I met Suzie Dawson was at Occupy Auckland protests. She was active, very active in making the protest movement known to everybody. Suzie was very active in the media side of things, very good at getting the message out and communicating with other people what the Occupy movement was about, which of course made her high profile quite quickly. Several of us there sort of did quite a lot of public sort of face stuff, and Suzie was certainly amongst them. The problem was that once we became, once it was visible to the people that were watching us that we were actually important in keeping the group together and functioning well and getting the message out, we were targeted for special attention. At protests, I was arrested more times than anybody else ever because my name was known, and Suzie was the same. Suzie's name was known. She was effective and good at what she did, which was getting the message out and communicating, and that made her a terrible threat to the powers that be. They were trying to paint the movement as full of lunatics, and we weren't. And Suzie clearly got that message through. So she got special attention from the police. I got special attention. You couldn't deny it. Our houses were broken into. Our cars were messed with. Our lives were messed with. Suzie was driven out of New Zealand. I was driven out of Auckland. I know, and she was targeted far more than I was. The reason she's not in New Zealand is because she wasn't safe here. She was targeted here, and her life and her children's lives were threatened. At the height of our protesting, when things were quite heated, Suzie often had her house broken into, interfered with. She was followed around by people when she was driving and walking around town, and it's a horrible, frightening thing. Firstly, you don't know, and she didn't know what was happening. It's just odd things start to happen. You can't think of why they are happening, but they are. You start telling people what's happening, and they start thinking you're crazy. And that's how it works. It makes you feel very vulnerable when they hold all the cards, when they are tampering with your house, when they are tampering with your phone and you're watching you, and putting things on the internet about you and your family and making you unsafe. And it was certainly happening. It was a frightening time for all of us. There was an incident after she left my house one night. It was horrible. She had the kids in the car and it was dark and she was on her way home, and she was monstered on the road. the same thing happened to my partner and I when we were traveling, and from the sounds of it, exactly the same thing. 2 cars traveling, boxing her in and trying to force her off the road. She rang very concerned about that, and you know, I know how scary that is, because that's happened to us too. The incident that I refer to, but that happened to me, was I was traveling on the same piece of road. It's a dark and twisty piece of road, and we'd pulled into a gas station and noticed a car had stopped close to us and nobody had gotten out, which was peculiar. So when we left, we did a little maneuver that put us behind the guy, because as soon as we started to move out, the guy in the car park started to move out too, and he thought we were going to head north again, and we didn't. We pretended to head south and ended up behind him. So further up the road, we were behind and could see him, and he was getting slower and slower. And then there was another car behind us that forced it, that came up behind us and forced us into a situation where we were between the 2 cars. And it was only that we braked heavily and ducked in behind them and took off that we weren't boxed in and forced into the corner. And that sounds very like the incident that happened to Suzie, the same piece of road, more or less. Suzie talks about people entering a house, and the same thing happened to me. I live in a rural situation along a busy road, and I am very careful to make sure when I go out, I shut all the doors, because I have pets that I don't want to get run over. Well, I went out, and I was only out an hour or so, and when I came back, the garage where the dogs were, all 3 doors were open, including the big heavy tilter door at the front. And one of my dogs had been run over and killed. And there's no way that could happen without somebody coming and doing it. And who would do that? You know, I mean, the thing is, you can't prove who did it, but it was definitely done. You know when someone's been in your house, and they do come into your house. It's very scary. Susie's work was of significance because Suzie talked to people who were of significance. She was talking to Kim.com and Honi Harawira, and talking about things like Edward Snowden and people who were important, and people who were threats to people in power, and that made her very important. She was sharing information from these very high profile people. So her work was very important here. The idea that there's any benefit to anyone from pretending that you've been targeted by your government is a bit peculiar. There's no way you can make money out of being targeted and being in exile in a foreign country where you don't know anyone and you're far away from all of your support. It's not anything anybody would choose. It's something that you're driven to. I am in sort of a similar situation in that I can't live in the city of my choice anymore. I was driven out of Auckland in the same way that Suzie was driven even further. I mean, I don't have kiddies, so I didn't have to go quite so far, but they definitely drive you out, and there's definitely no gain for anyone who's driven out of their hometown or home country. Certainly no financial gain. Some people say all sorts of things about people that they don't know. I know that Susie's in Russia, and I know Susie's children are with her. I have this dream that my friend Suzie is going to come back to New Zealand, because I really miss her. But when I think about it seriously, I think that she's just going to come back to the same trouble she had when she left, because I don't think for one moment that Susie's going to stop sharing information that she feels people need to hear. And I think that makes her a target to the New Zealand government, because there's a lot of things they don't want people to know. And I don't think that Suzie could come back to New Zealand safely. I think that she would be targeted again. And I don't mean just physically safely. She might be physically safe, but they'd certainly mess her up in every other way they possibly could, and life would be impossible for her here. If I think about how Suzie could have sought redress in New Zealand for the things that were happening to her, I sort of run through my mind who she could have gone to. Now, she did actually approach authorities to help her in some situations, and the police clearly were not on her side. I mean, clearly they were part of the problem. She did make a complaint about a couple of things to them, and they let it be known, they told her that they weren't going to help her. So if the police weren't going to help her, then what agency would? They're doing something they don't want you to know they're doing, so they're not going to have an agency that's going to check on the covert operations. There's no redress that you could get here. The authorities that are doing it are the same ones you'd have to go to try and get some help, and they're not going to help you. So there is no recourse. Once you're a target in New Zealand, then the only way out is to get out, I think. There was a student protest in Simon Street, and I remember it very well because I'd arrived late and I'd purposely decided to stay out of the limelight because all I had to do was show my face to get arrested. So I was staying out of the firing line. Unfortunately, the cops had different ideas, and they maneuvered in such a way that I ended up in the front line with a circle of cops around about 100 of us. And they started pushing us and basically trying to get us to fall over backwards, which is quite painful. So we sat down. So then they proceeded to climb all over us to get at particular people that they were after, using a conga maneuver that because I was at the front, I was stood all over by these cops with their great big boots. They were then grabbing us, two cops grabbing a person, and I was one of them, and dragged and thrown on the ground, and then cable tied and thrown in a paddy wagon. But I've watched that video since, and the video's still on YouTube, and it shows what they were doing. One man was on the ground, and the two cops were practicing a technique I've seen them use of strangling somebody to unconsciousness. And you can see this young man that they've got their hands around. One cop's got his hands around this man's throat, and you see the man starting to froth and then starting to fit where the cops are trying to hide it, but somebody's filmed it and it's still there, and you can see he's actually unconscious and fitting before they let go of his throat. Now, I don't know, you've probably also seen they did the same thing to a young girl. She was about 18 or 19 in Aotea Square following a protest for TPPA, and they strangled her to unconsciousness and then carried her away unconscious to arrest her. It was appalling. I've seen some disgusting things. They picked my daughter up by the throat and lifted her off the ground. I was furious that night. Dreadful what they do, dreadful. The violence is just incredible. It's very difficult to exercise a right to protest safely in New Zealand, that's for sure. The incident where 4 cops were caught with the same badge number, Z557, definitely raised the profile of the whole Occupy movement and started to make the police look a little bit ugly. I'm quite sure that the authorities would have wanted us not to have exposed that, and having been successful, I'm sure they were quite angry with us and certainly wanted us shut down and made quiet somehow. The raid on Kim.com here coincided more or less, I think it was about a week or 2 weeks in between the evictions the occupiers in Aotea Square. And I think that the reason that there were 4 cops there wearing Z557 badges is because they weren't really cops. They were people that had been there for Kim.com. And I think they felt as if that the Occupy movement was important enough that they shared some of their expertise from America in our protests as well. But there were odd people around, like the Thompson and Clark security were there, and I recognized some of them. But one of the people that stopped me, he stopped me from going into a parking building with my car, so I couldn't get out of the car because I couldn't park it anywhere. But he leapt in front of me, and it was the middle of summer, it was January, and it was scorching hot. And the only reason I mention it is because the guy that leapt in front of me and flashed this badge at me was white as a ghost, and I thought he must have come from somewhere cold. He did not have a New Zealand tan, and I thought, well, they'd roped in some foreigners. See, I think that's what happened here. I think with Kim.com that the Americans took over, because it's not our style to helicopter raid somebody and, take guns in and stuff like that. I think that whole time period was a training ground to get our cops a bit more militarized. What happened to us high-profile occupiers, when Occupy actually was shut down and we did move from there, it became clear that some of us, our protesting hadn't ended with the movement, that Suzie was still involved in and even more involved in other issues that were important, and probably more important leading up to the 2014 election. She was still out there meeting New Zealand political figures, important political figures, and talking about things that the powers that be don't necessarily want us to talk about. And the Moment of Truth event, where so many important people were all brought together, and it was such a public forum with so much public support, clearly made Suzie a target to shut down. The end of the Occupy movement didn't shut Suzie up and made her even more of a target, I think. The more you feel the pressure from authority to make you be quiet, to stop you from doing what you're doing, the more you feel the need to expose more truth and to fight against the system. So it becomes a bit of a tight spiral where the harder they push you, the harder you work, and the more they hate you, the more you become a target. It's a difficult thing because they've got all the power. In the end, they're the winners. You don't really have a lot of choice. You either give up or you die trying. I think one of the main things that probably was beginning to upset authority was the fact that there was a great deal of public support for some of the messages that we initially started to realise were happening because of Occupy. The surveillance of activists was pretty obvious, and the messing with activists was obvious, and it became important to people when they realised that there was an organisation within our own country that was potentially spying on absolutely everyone. And it was because of largely because of Suzie's media work that people even began to hear of GCSB. I mean, most of us didn't realise that there was an organisation that spied on us. But I think that thanks to her work, we all know exactly who's watching and why, when and why and how. And that, the government doesn't want us to know how far their reach is. So they certainly wanted her to stop talking about that. I think the biggest danger of a movement like Occupy is that because we were well organised and because we had good reach and because we started to get a lot of public support, people began to pay attention more to things that were happening. Our marches were getting bigger and bigger, and people were getting more and more. The word is radicalized. People were beginning to start to say, well, things are not all right, and actually moving their asses into the streets. Well, they didn't really want us to continue with that kind of momentum, did they? Lots and lots and lots. It's like a snowball. A few people start to see things, and then you wake up and see a lot more things. And I think that the trouble with Susie's following in New Zealand was that it was getting bigger and bigger. People were seeing more and more of the corruption that is our everyday life here.
Is Graham here?
All right, everyone. So that was a very powerful testimony coming from Lynn Nye. And again, like we've been mentioning, we have more guests this evening. And our next guest is a very special one. In particular, we are now joined by Graham Elwood. Graham is a comedian, filmmaker, host of The Political Vigilante on YouTube, and a frequent co-host of The Jimmy Dore Show. Graham is also a close friend of Suzie, and he recently visited Moscow and spent a week with Suzie and her children. So Graham, thank you so much for coming on, and also thank you for really supporting this campaign and streaming these live events every Sunday at 8 p.m. We really appreciate it.
Hi, Graham.
Well, Taylor and Chrissy, thank you so much for having me and to talk about this. And it's also great to see Suzie. So I start laughing when I hear Suzie's making this up. That makes me laugh because where she's broadcasting right now is the guest room that I stayed in. So the fact that I would joke, I say this is a very elaborate hoax and a very well-funded one for her to have this place in Moscow, have hired 2 child actors, and take me around just to trick a comedian. So,
Can you talk about your experience in Russia? And before you do that, really, can you talk about how you met Suzie and connected with her?
Yeah, I actually interviewed Elizabeth Lee Voss on my show, Political Vigilante, and she said, you should talk to this woman, Suzie Dawson. And I said, yeah. And this was in, I don't know, about a year ago, maybe a little over a year and a half ago. And I interviewed Suzie. I didn't know much about her at all. And so she started to tell me who she was, and then I started doing the Unity for Jay. They had me on Unity for Jay. Actually, no, it was the reverse order. I think Elizabeth Lee Voss said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing these Unity for Jay things?" And I said yes. And then Suzie was on them, and then I interviewed Suzie on my show. And it's kind of a funny because I just thought she was just like Julian Assange activist and living in New Zealand or something because of her accent, and so we're talking, and she's like, she had done all this thorough research on who I was. And then I was like, wait, what? She goes, Graham, you don't know? And I explained who she was. I was like, oh, wow. And so then I interviewed her a couple times, and I would do Unity for Jay. And then, I just would speak to her over the phone basically, and got to hear her whole story. And it was really pretty amazing what she had to go through, and that she was in asylum in Russia. And the more I talked to her about it, and she would say stuff to me like, oh yeah, Russia is nothing like what you think it is. I came here with all these preconceived notions as a Westerner, and none of them were correct. So I really, I just decided, in talking to her, that I just wanted to go. I wanted to see what Russia was all about. I've been into war zones, so I wasn't scared. And it was a fantastic experience, and she introduced me to some people who showed me around. I got to see Moscow and Russia in an amazing way, not just really as a tourist, but getting to go to local spots. And I met, she introduced me to Peter Lavelle, and I got to see, what she's sacrificed. And, this is challenging for her. This is challenging for her kids. And, in the influx of will I get asylum or not, it's affecting everybody. I saw it firsthand. I mean, I just saw it firsthand. And so she's introduced me to people like I've interviewed John Kiriakou on my show. And, the more I hear her story and then listening to the audio of that woman that was with her and during the Occupy movement in New Zealand, it's really, and the more research just I've done on my show, Political Vigilante, it's pretty scary what they can do, and Suzie would always joke with me. She goes, Graham, I was just a suburban soccer mom. And then I see what was happening at Occupy and how they were just, as we saw the video footage of the New Zealand police, at the behest of the United States intelligence community, just, violent with protesters and how they've done it. And so as I've uncovered more on this show and talked to Suzie, I see how widespread it is. And if they can do it to her, they can, that we talk about, that's what we always say this, if they can do it to Julian Assange, they can do it to Chelsea Manning, they can do it to Suzie, they can do it to any of us. And seeing what she's had to go through in Russia was, it did two things. Like, wow, it's pretty scary what they can do, but also I have so much respect for her. And I remember one of the first questions I asked her when I interviewed her, I said, well, what about, people say, well, what about, is this right to do this, to your kids? And, what about them? She goes, well, what kind of parent would I be if I just let the powers that be in the intelligence community and the Five Eyes just do whatever they want without resisting? What kind of lesson would I be teaching my children then? And I was like, wow, that is a profound statement. And that is what a true activist is. And it's inspirational for me. And seeing what she's had to go through.
It's definitely a willingness to be able to live an uncomfortable life for your own principles and for the greater good. Now, without sharing too much information, can you describe to the viewers what her situation is like in Russia? I know you did touch on it a little bit, but if you could go in some more depth about her situation there.
Yeah. So, I mean, she's living in this apartment with her kids and, is sort of an influx. So the kids can't go to school because they don't have asylum. So they're kind of stuck, and they have some activities and stuff outside of the school, but it's hard because, when you're a kid, you go to school, that's where you make your friends, especially if you've moved. And, I could identify because, the challenges, I mean, when I was 5-6 years old, my father had a research scholarship and we lived in Munich, Germany. And I was in a foreign country with people who didn't speak my language, and I went to school, and it was really challenging. So they're in a foreign country and they don't have that much interaction with other kids. And this is what the American intelligence community does. They try to make your life so difficult that you either give up information or just stop or whatever. So her daily life, it's not completely horrifying. They were, but it's really hard. I mean, it is challenging what they're doing. And the one thing I will say too, I didn't see any tailing interference from the Russian government at all. I didn't see that at all. And something Suzie had said to me before I got there. She goes, Graham, I haven't had a peep from the Russian. No one's, because everyone, Americans are like, oh, the Russian government must be all over her. Why? If anything.
Yeah, Graham, can you kind of just summarize a little bit maybe about the big differences you noticed on what the American culture says about Russia versus what you experienced being in Russia?
Sure. So, in America, we're told it's a surveillance state. Russia's a surveillance state. We're told There's all I've ever seen since the time I was a kid was the depiction of Russia, and Americans, I think, still believe it's like it was like the Soviet Union under Stalin or whatever. And the first night we get there, Susie's like, we're going to take some scooters. And we just got on these little Razor scooters and went around Moscow. And the first thing I see is like a Krispy Kreme, a Starbucks, this California diner that has like a statue of the Blues Brothers and Elvis. And I just was laughing. I was like, wow, this anti-American sentiment is so prevailing there. And, people are walking around. I see a bunch of cops and secret police everywhere. And, the people were so nice to me. I did stand-up shows in Moscow and St. Petersburg. There wasn't this heavy, I didn't hear any anti-American sentiment at all. I mean, they were just like, and I would ask people, and I shot some footage, and I released some of it on my channel. I'm going to release a larger documentary. And I asked people, like, what is your opinion of the United States? Oh, Americans are really nice. And, I go, what do you think about, Putin or whatever? Some people are like, oh, he's good. He brought stability. Some people are like, oh, we don't like him that well, but every government's corrupt. America's corrupt. They had this attitude. Like one guy interviewed, and this is on my channel, like a cab driver, and he had lost his job working in the cargo port in St. Petersburg, which is a big harbor town. And he lost his job because of the sanctions that Obama implemented in 2014. And then I said, are you mad? Are you mad at Obama? Are you mad at Americans? And he said, oh, not angry, just fact. He just had this, he wasn't mad at Americans. That's what happened. And, they were, people are like, oh, are they surveilling you? I go, well, what country spends more money on surveilling its own people than the United States? No one. So, the people that came to my comedy shows were nice. When I came into the country, I was expecting this big, and there's this like blonde girl customs agent who just kind of stamps my passport and she's like laughing with her friend, like that's how I got into the country. There wasn't these like guards with the guns and and when I left the country, they were like, yeah, no problem. Here you go. I was more worried honestly about coming back into the United States. And so
you're bringing up some really great points about, some misconceptions by Americans on Russia and what life is like there. But after, visiting Suzie and getting to know her over time, I know you watched this stream up until you came on as well. Can you talk about why it is so important and imperative for people to be signing this open letter and to be visiting protectsuzie.com, this new website that we just launched?
Yeah, because I've seen firsthand how they've upended her life. I've seen, her kids, they can't go to school. They miss their friends and family back in New Zealand, which, as has been stated numerous times at the beginning of this stream, if she goes back there, they're gonna target her. I mean, they targeted all around the world. I mean, that's why she had to go to Russia. And I think it's really important for people watching this to get involved. I always talk about that on Political Vigilante. You might feel like you're just one person and you're all alone and you don't have much power, but if everybody signs this, we can show, and I think laid out very compellingly by Suzie and her team here, of what has been done to her, how they've targeted her. And if anybody has more questions, please go to the website. And this is how we can affect change, because it is feel very daunting. We feel like, oh God, and this is why I don't want to speak up because they'll crush us. And that's what this is all about. Make no mistake. I mean, putting what they're doing to Julian, what they're doing to Chelsea Manning, and what they're doing to Suzie Doss is a very clear message from the ruling class to say, shut your mouth and don't question what we're doing. So we have to resist. We have to push back. And one of the ways to do that is to go to this website and sign this letter. This is important because most people, the propaganda machine to keep people misinformed. Oh, Julian Assange is a Russian asset. Well, all these crazy things that they say, they have billions of dollars. They have a global infrastructure through the media, through police and intelligence communities. As was discussed, America basically was just operating on New Zealand soil. So this is how all of us can say no. There are more of us than there are of them. The American empire is collapsing. The ruling class is being exposed for the evil sociopaths that they are. And
This is a
this
great
is so
way
important.
to this is a great way to take a stance against these, powerful agencies who abuse their power. And I think I mentioned this to you before when you interviewed me on your show about this campaign, the One versus Five Eye campaign. I said that it's really important that we get behind somebody who is already taking up this very necessary fight. Now, earlier on the stream, Christy and I talked about how Suzie has impacted our lives and our work and how we've been able to learn so much from her. And so many people have been touched by her work. So on a personal level, can you describe how she has impacted your life, your activism, and your journalism?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, when I think like something, anyways, I've sort of problems I've had to deal with just in the last 2.5, 3 years of doing this show of like, oh man, this is challenging. YouTube's demonetizing me, they're throttling my views, and I'll just go, but look what she's having to go through. I'm really inspired by her and her just straightforward, no nonsense, this isn't right. And also, I've had some personal conversations with her about stuff I've gone through. I in January of this year released a very personal story about what I had gone through as a kid and what I had gone through with a violent ex. And I talked to her about that before I went public with it, and she was um, very helpful and supportive of that. And she was one of the I had a handful of people I have been talking to in the months leading up to putting that out publicly about. And she was encouraging of like, it's important to tell your story. So people, when you tell your personal story, other people go, wow, this has happened to me, or I didn't know that was happening. Either one of those responses is a good thing. You're connecting with someone who feels maybe alone or isolated, or they're the only one it's happened to. And then you're educating other people. And so she helped me with that on a personal level. And then her actions are, just like, let's get to the truth. It doesn't matter. And that's so much of getting to know her, interviewing her, having personal conversations with her, and then seeing how she lives in her home, and how she's just like unrelenting, just, this isn't right, I'm not giving up. It motivates me in what I do on political vigilante. And she was the reason I decided to go to Moscow. I was like, well, if I want to see her. I want to meet her in person. I want to talk to her, and I want to bring a camera and see this for myself. She motivated me to go to Russia, to just say, I don't care, I'm going. And, I set up a GoFundMe. And so she's, on a personal level, she's helped me personally. She's helped this show. And she's helped me professionally. And, I've had great conversations with her about stuff. She sent me information to discuss on my show. And, I consider her a friend, and I have mad respect for her and, this activist community that I'm fairly new to. I've only been doing this, like I said, 2.5, 3 years, is really, I'm honored and humbled and proud to be a part of it, because these are people really putting it all on the line. She is someone putting it all on the line to do what's right, to fight the ruling class, which is just trying to crush everybody. I mean, it's pretty awful.
So
And the more
Graham,
we expose them, the better we are.
yeah. So before we do wrap up here, and before I give you an opportunity to give your last, statements and thoughts, I want to ask you, what do you say to those, without focusing too much on the smear campaigns and the misinformation that's been put forward about Suzie? What do you say to those that still push these smears and say that this is something that never happened? because you met with her. You're one of the very few people that's met with her personally. So what is your response to people who are in that camp?
Well, I first of all, I just say, well, like you said, I go, I've met her, I've been there. I go, this would, like I said at the top of this interview, it would just be a preposterous, con for her to run. And then the question I ask on my show is, I start asking questions like, well, follow the money. What is she gaining? What is she gaining by uprooting her family and moving to Moscow? She's not swimming in. There's no angle for her to.
To be clear, it wasn't initially Russia.
Sure.
First, she went to Germany, and when there was clearly no other option, she did end up seeking temporary asylum in Russia.
Yeah,
so I just want to make that distinction.
That's a great point. That she's they've chased her and harassed her all over the place, and Russia was her last option. And for people to say that, I just go, what you expose the powerful, you expose the intelligence community. It's the same thing I say when people say, oh, Julian this, or I go, look what he exposed. That's why they're coming after him. Don't you think they would spend the money on these smear campaigns? Don't you think they have a money and a power reason to go after somebody that's accusing them or exposing them, rather, is a better word? So I ask questions and I point the facts out to people. I go, what is she gaining? A soccer mom from New Zealand, why would she go to Germany, get hassled there, then Hong Kong, and why? It doesn't make any sense at all. Whereas you see the powerful have a motive to go after her and to cover this up. It's very deliberate to choke somebody in front of a group of activists. That's a message. That's a warning. Stay in line or we're going to drive your head into the ground, literally and figuratively. So I would tell people, do your own research. It's what I say in Political Vigilante. So go to her website, do your own research, investigate these private intelligence companies, see what they're up to, see what's happening. Talk to other activists in the Occupy movement. You'll start to see a pattern emerge. You'll start to see, there's no way all these people, John Kiriakou and all these people would be going along with this if it wasn't legitimate. There's just no way. And that's what I would say to people. Like, do your own research and follow the money. And the people making all the money have the reason to do it.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to also be donating to this campaign, which you all can do so at oneversus5i.com/donate, and then also at protectsuzie.com/donate. Graham Elwood, thank you so much for joining us. Quickly, though, please give us some final thoughts about Suzie and why it is so important that we all support her and her family.
So everybody out there watching this, if you can just throw in a little bit of money and sign this letter and then spread this out to other friends and family, that is the power that we have. And that's what we need to remind the 1% every damn day. They're not going to respond to shame. They don't have a soul. They don't care. They respond to fear. We need to let them know that there are more of us than there are of them. And we aren't going to stand by and let them do this, because if we let it happen to Suzie, it can happen to you. So throw in a couple of bucks and sign this letter.
Absolutely. Always very passionate. Graham Elwood, thank you so much. And thank you for supporting Suzie and the One versus 5i campaign.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right, everybody, that was Graham Elwood. Be sure to follow him at Graham Elwood on Twitter. And you could also catch his show on YouTube, The Political Vigilante. We do have other guests lined up for this evening, so make sure you do stick with us. Our next guest, I will introduce him, is Commander X. And he is a hacktivist, a personal friend of Julian Assange and of Suzie. He was also persecuted by the FBI and has recently gained emergency refugee status and asylum in Mexico. And he will be joining us. I believe he is with us now. We look forward to interviewing him and speaking with him once we could get him up on the screen, and I think we have them. Hi, thank you so much for joining us. You're muted.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to the Creek Zone. So it's good to meet you. When I got the message from Suzie to come on, I got all these instructions on where I'm supposed to put my head. And I'm like, Suzie, I have no electricity here, so I've got candles, and I got an adjustable sort of flashlight. I can get brighter. That's kind of creepy, though. So I'm working with. It's a hack, you know? I mean, sometimes you just have to. Suzie did warn you I'm very strange, right? But hi. Hello,
Hi.
everybody. Hello to all my peeps. Somebody tweet this shizzle out. It's good to meet you. Welcome from, or hello from Central Mexico. Tell us about how you know.
So
Yes,
I know
so
you are a friend. Oh, go ahead, Christy.
Can you tell us about when you met Suzie, how you got to know her and her situation, and just yeah, we'll just start with how you met Suzie and how you know her.
Suzie was no stranger by the time I met her. I mean, in the sense that, I mean, I think that you know, there's a certain set of people that have been around for at least a decade, that have been doing stuff that we all kind of know each other. I mean, I could sit here and tell war stories about how I know Jeremy Hammond, about how I, you know, Arnold Bear Brown. I mean, endless. I mean, we all sort of know each other. You know, I think it's kind of sad because I think we all liked each other a lot more back in the old days. You know, when we were younger, and when, you know, when COINTELPRO and these this is what you're describing, what the other fellow Graham, God bless him, who was just on describing, is pretty standard COINTELPRO stuff. This stuff has been around since the 70s. You know, I remember one of the things I think that is difficult for me to accept about my case and also about Suzie's case, and a lot of these cases, especially like Jeremy, who I mentioned, and Chelsea, is the amount of energy, time, wonderfully smart people like yourself, and the people who are also on my team, who are also equally wonderfully talented and smart people advocating for myself in my case. All of this talent. I remember sitting with some AIM dudes, man, in the 70s. And for those not familiar, American Indian Movement. These are cats who were fighting this shit with CB radios, you know, and rifles and shit. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, it's resistance as gritty as you get, like on Pine Ridge and shit like that. And you know, they told me that this is how they get movement. What they do is they bog you down, and you end up putting so much financial energy, so much time, so much people and talent into saving your own, bringing your own home, so to speak, or you know, and getting your own out of the way, the line of fire. You spend so much time doing that you end up, that absorbs the entire movement. But what they didn't count on is the new age we live in. The multiplier is the internet. The power is the internet. As a hacktivist, as an author about hacktivism, it's my huge advocacy. It's my huge belief that we live in an age where the keyboard multiplies you and makes you into the power of 1,000 1970s or 80s activists. So we now have the ability. Look at the wonderful, beautiful site that Suzie made, that you guys made. I mean, that's how you do it. That's how I did it. I had a nice site as well, and a team advocating for me, and we did live streams and media, and that's how it works, guys. The thing is, I'm here to tell you tonight, I got political asylum in Mexico. I just did it a few days ago, and I live streamed that fucking shit. I live streamed that shit. This is how you do it. This is how you, what you're doing right now is a template. I mean, we did it slightly differently. It had maybe a different flavor because I harnessed Anonymous. I'm a proud flag-bearing member of Anonymous. I came to this country literally carrying the flag of Anonymous, and So, you know, we did it a little bit different. It had a different spin and a different flavor, obviously, than what you guys are doing with Suzie. It is much more OWS flavor. It's beautiful though, and it's perfect. And you know what Suzie's accomplishing with website and the data, especially, is very vital. I think that shit should all be printed out and then sent to the Russian government. And that I essentially accomplished with my 2 books. I wrote 2 books about the shit that I did, so I didn't have to do all of that. I didn't have to. You know, I hope Suzie will write one someday. I'm really anxious because I really think one of the most traumatic things what really sold me on Suzie, and made me reach out to her actually, really like boldly, which is, you know, in this day and age, it's a risk, you know, especially as a guy and an activist and everything. But I remember I reached out to Suzie, and it was because I was shocked by her YouTube video, Person of Interest. And so what I did, I'm in the radio industry. So what I did is, you can find this. Suzie can share the link somehow. I'm sure she might still have it somewhere. But I loaded it up for her. But we edited, for my radio show, we edited a special radio version, audio only version of Person of Interest, where we took out a lot of stuff that maybe just went with video, and we kind of just tightened it up. And I moved a couple of things around. And I lost my picture of the girl that's interviewing me, but just for the record.
She stepped out for 1 second. She's still there, but I want to ask.
Okay.
So I encourage everybody, if they have not seen Person of Interest, which is Suzie's documentary, I encourage everybody to absolutely check it out because it's fantastic, and you can hear her talk about her own words. Now, can you?
It was very emotional, and I mean, it was gritty. It was gritty and raw. Back then, it hadn't even been edited. I think it was one of the very first versions. I saw one of the very first versions she ever put out. So it was very rough. Like, I mean, you could barely hear the audio and stuff. And over the years, I think it's gone through a few iterations maybe and gotten a little bit better. And then I really liked what we did with the radio. We added some music, appropriate music, and some other stuff to it that I thought really made it very nice audio anyway version of it. And Suzie's got that somewhere. I set up a podcast channel for her on Mixcloud and put that up there for her. But and I reached out to her unilaterally. I mean, I remember that much. I don't know. I'm old and I meet a lot of people, but I do remember reaching out to her. I remember it was just within minutes, I think, on Twitter after my first viewing on YouTube of Person of Interest, which is a long time. I just don't even know how many years ago, but it was a while ago. And I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, man, I fucking support this. You know, you may know my story. At the time, I was on the run in Canada trying to get a political asylum going up there. That didn't really work out. Here, it worked out within minutes after I walked in the door. They were very nice to me and very happy to give me political asylum here in Mexico. So I'm very blessed, and I want to share that. And it's interesting because my fans who might have tuned who just tweeted this out, I got kind of a Commander X history moment because up until now, I have not ever signed any petitions or any letters. Like, I even got asked by, like, I remember Jimmy asked if I would write a court letter for him because I knew him. Free Bear definitely asked me. I said no to everybody because at the time I was a fugitive from the U.S. and I did not have political asylum. I did not have sanction anywhere. I was on the run. And I didn't see how that could possibly do anybody a lick of fucking good. Well, now that I have political asylum and I am officially a refugee and safe in Mexico, my first letter that I'm going to sign is going to be the Protect Suzie open letter. I encourage all of my peeps who tuned in because of my tweet just now, please, let's go over, find out where this new website of Suzie's is, Protect Suzie, and head on over there. Let's sign that letter. Let's begin exactly the way we did it with me just a week ago, where we did the petition, the change.org. It works. It puts pressure on these people, and this sort of thing works. And we did it, so we now are going to turn around and do this for Suzie. So this is the first case where we can begin to make a difference. And for me personally, it's a cathartic moment. I've never signed anything official in 10 years for any other act. So Suzie will be the first historic. I will put my name on her.
So just to be clear, so just to be clear real quick, I want to reiterate what you just said. It's very powerful. This is Commander X we're speaking with right now, who just received refugee status and asylum in Mexico. He has not signed any letter like this in 10 years, but he is signing Suzie's open letter. That's pretty incredible. If you can't be convinced.
There'll be more. I mean, I want to say everybody's petition eventually, but the IDIS is the first one. And I want to say that I'm not only the first Anon to get political asylum ever in history, in any foreign country, especially from the Five Eyes, but in any foreign country. But I'm also, we found this out afterwards. We had no idea until we had a documentary film crew that was the entire thing, like a regular, like real motion picture documentary people. They're making a movie about my life, but I don't want to talk too much about that. It's a very disturbing concept. But and they somebody just typed something in my face. I forget what I was talking about. Put me back on track there, young lady.
So can you tell me why you decided to sign this open letter, or will sign this open letter, and then also why it is so important that other people support Suzie Dawson specifically?
Sure, and I'll just mention, by the way, I remembered what I was thinking about. I'm also, for those interested, the very first ever in history American citizen, U.S. citizen, to ever claim political asylum in Mexico. How about them apples? Barry, come on down here. Suzie should come here too. We'll grant you political asylum in 10 sec flat. We could are here. I think that why do we need to sign it? We need to sign it because I have been saying this for the entire time that I've been on the run for 10 years. We have an obligation as a movement. This is a resistance movement now. This has gone beyond protest. OWS, Anonymous, all of this, we all know where we are now. We're miles beyond waving cardboard signs in their faces and getting gassed in the streets. This is, some would say it's a road, some would say it's a war of resistance. It's definitely one of the biggest and most important fights, cultural battles in history. That's what we're involved in. And so for me, I look at it from a militaristic point of view. I'm a part of Anonymous. I'm a part of the hacktivist movement that's involved in, forming crews and being tight and being organized in that way. And we have an obligation to be as honorable as our enemy, at least. And our enemy knows to bring their own home. They always bring their own home. And the mantra that you hear these fucking heads who are part of the surveillance complex talk about, okay? So that is actually a fairly honorable thing, and we need to be, at least, like I said, this honorable thing, and we can bring our own home too. In old days, that was daunting. Like I said, in the 70s, even into the 90s, that was a very daunting task, and it could actually absorb entire movements. But we live in a day and age where we have this wonderful multiplier of power called the internet, called hacktivism. So we can do the kinds of things that Suzie is doing, which are all the right moves, guys. And I guarantee you that Suzie's team is very smart because they remind me of my team here, okay? And we were smart and we had a plan, and the plan worked. So if Suzie says that signing this letter, if these people here that are united to sign this letter is important, it means that they've already thought how to work, okay? The same with my petition. When I printed that out and handed that off, the cameras rolling and the whole bit, I knew what the fuck I was doing, and I spent 2 weeks asking, begging all of you to sign that petition, and you all did, from all over the world, and it made a difference. It made an impact. I saw the look on his face when he took it. Okay, I was standing right there, a meter from the dude. It had an impact. Your actions had an impact. And it's because you followed my instructions. So now what Suzie and her team have done is put together a template very similar. And so what's going to be asked of you is going to be very minimal. It's going to be about retweeting. It's going to be about getting this message out. And it's going to be about, in this case, there's, I think, some action. There's, we sign this letter. We donate cash if we got it. And so just know that I'm really impressed. I'm impressed by the team. It reminds me of my own. I'm impressed by the plan. It reminds me of my own. And I'm here to say that I'm living proof. Less than a week old, I've had political asylum now for 9 days, I think, not even 10 days since I got political asylum here to great fanfare here in Mexico, and became the first ever U.S. citizen. You know, and as soon as I look at the guy's face when I told him, he's like, "Well, sir, I'm here." And I went 45 miles west of Juarez, and I cut a hole in your barbed wire fence, and I walked in, and dude, he's like, "I see." And they never occurred to them that somebody might come from the other direction, right? But yeah, we got to do this one for Suzie. We got to pony up, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be all over. You guys know that I'm a Suzie fanboy, straight up. I like what Suzie does. I mean, I like her work. I think that Suzie, people have called to be critical for a long time. Julian, when he first set up WikiLeaks, the idea of WikiLeaks was to be based on the Wikipedia model. That's where the name comes from. And it was Julian's original concept, the idea that people would then crowdsource. People would go on and look at the leaks and write articles and expand articles into Wikipedia.
Right. You know what a common theme here?
Not so. You know, the average people aren't going to do it. So what Suzie does, and what with Elizabeth, I've seen her do it with Elizabeth and other people, is to go out and take this and do it in a very professional, broadcast sort of manner, and go out and it's crowdsourced. I mean, people are in her chat and able to comment and help her find Cindy's documents. So when Anne mentioned her old show, which I loved, Decipher You, we've got to go see the old YouTube Decipher You shows. That's where it's at, because that's where Suzie is really shining, showing her value in all of this, because it's a value that people have called for a long time.
Right.
With Anonymous, going all the way back to the original Collateral Murder videos, we had Operation Leakspin, which was the same idea, but it never took off. What Suzie has done is she's made it a success. So it's important that she continue that work, that we support.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to support this campaign. We greatly appreciate your support, and we are very honored to have you alongside us with this fight. And, we congratulate you on your refugee and asylum in Mexico. But I want to thank you so much for joining us. We do need to move on this evening, but thank you once again, Commander X, everybody.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me. Good luck with everything, Suzie. I'm going to go to the website right now and sign, girl. Good luck, girl.
All right.
See you soon.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Suzie. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. All right, that was Commander X. I'm going to hand it over to my co-host to introduce our final guest of the evening.
So I'm very excited to introduce Vivian Kubrick is with us this evening. I've previously worked with her on Unity for J. She's a filmmaker, composer, documentary, and she's also the daughter of the film director Stanley Kubrick, who wrote. She also wrote the score to her father's movie, The Full Metal Jacket, and made the Making of the Shining documentary. And she's a close personal friend of Suzie. Vivian, welcome to the stream. We're so happy to have you here. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Christy. Hi, Taylor. I just must say how beautiful you both look tonight.
Thank you.
Anyway,
joining us.
Sorry. Oh, absolutely. I've always felt that it's very hard for people to understand a reality that they literally have no experience of. And I fortunately have several very alternate realities that most people have not experienced. And certainly being the daughter of an extremely famous, iconic even, film director and show business. And believe me, that's a highly gangster organization, Hollywood. And oh, sorry, there was a message. I tell you, that always gets me when there's a message pops up. I'm like, what? And people just don't understand. They have the superficial reality of what maybe an activist might go through, but the actual experience of going through it is something that you cannot relate to unless it happens to you. And sorry. And the reason why I'm going on about this is because I'm paralleling it with the reality of, the world of entertainment, which is, believe me, as dangerous, as backstabbing, as political, and factually, if you look at the history of Hollywood, as dangerous. You can lose your life and everything you have. You only have to look at the blacklisting during the McCarthy period, where people lost absolutely their entire careers and their lives were destroyed. So it's there's parallel experiences there of the intensity of the spotlight, the danger involved, the money involved, and the big guys at the top that can totally destroy or make your life. And we've seen it with Weinstein, where he threatened these women and said, look, if you don't, I'm sorry, I'm going to be disgusting, if you don't suck my cock, you're not going to get a job, and I'm going to blacklist your name from here to hell. So it's like, the viciousness of humanity, the viciousness of the worst of humanity is actually very unoriginal. They all do the same thing. They threaten, they bully, they break the law. And
can you tell us in particular why it is so important that people support Suzie and sign this open letter and donate to this campaign and support the One Versus Bye Bye campaign and our new initiative, protectsuzie.com?
Yes, I will try and stick to the point. Well, obviously, the most important reason why is if you don't want to live in a dystopian nightmare for eternity, we've got to kick the shit out of the people that are destroying this world. And the only way to do that is together. Suzie is a perfect example of someone who has taken the initiative, has the guts, talent, brains, and real talent for communicating. I mean, she's a brilliant writer. She writes excellent, incredibly piercing articles. And let's face it, not all of us are like that. Not all of us are brave. Not all of us are articulate. Not all of us have time. There must be a million people with, families and jobs, and they just can't do it. And so here's a woman who not only can do it, but wants to do it and is really bloody good at it. And I mean, that's the reason why I took part in the Unity for J, is I read Suzie's articles. I thought how brilliant she is. And then she just contacted me on Twitter and said, would you like to take part in Unity for J? And obviously the reason why I wanted to take part in that is for the same thing. Julian was kicking ass, and I don't want someone like that to be destroyed for two reasons. One, I think it's very important that he keeps doing his work. And two, I fucking love him and I don't want him to be hurt. I want these incredible heroes to be heroes and to stay heroes, to not be written out of history because they were successfully crushed. And, as Commander X was saying, we've got a force multiplier, which is actually a military term. It's like if you have 200 troops and 5,000 miles, you can, force multiply that if those 200 guys have a GPS unit with them. In other words, you just have to add certain things that give you what in effect means you're a force multiplied. In other words, you're not only 200 men now, you're the equivalent of 10,000 men. Because you have a GPS unit, you can be in the right place. Or if you had a drone, that would be a force multiplier. So someone like Suzie is a force multiplier for us, for people who are like going, shit, I hate what's going on. Oh my God, what do I do? Suzie becomes that force multiplier for humanity. And although you may think, well, shit, why should I give her money and buy her shopping or help her legal costs? Because everything that happens to Suzie becomes a precedent for what's going to happen to everyone else. Mm-hmm. And we saw that, when I appreciate and love Alex Jones. God bless me. So when he first got taken off YouTube and he was literally with total synchronicity, not synchronicity, in total sync, all the platforms deleted his platform and his, decades of accumulated intellectual property on those platforms. And let's face it, that's what that is. And while I'm here, I think we should all start pushing for the companies that decide to ban people, that they have to give you your entire file so that you can move it on to another platform, because otherwise they've just destroyed all your intellectual property. It would be if somebody said, oh, we don't like Warner Brothers movies, and they just went and, you know, incinerated them all. You know, you can't do that. And there needs to be a law. And that's, you know, another thing that we need to do. But the reason why people need to sign this letter is, what could be bloody easier? You know, you just sign the letter, for God's sake. It takes you 2 seconds. I did it myself while I was listening, you know, to everyone else on the show tonight. And
Vivian, you've gotten to know Suzie, and so I know you've talked to her, but as you're looking at this website and you've learned all these things of how Suzie was targeted, what was your reaction to realize that this person who has become your friend has experienced these things through the years that drove her out of New Zealand?
Right. Okay. So, you know what it's like to have a friend, and you talk to each other and you tell each other what you're going through and what's happening. And you know, so I've gotten to know what Suzie's been going through. And like I said, the one advantage that I have over most people is that I can totally relate to Suzie. For instance, when my father was making Barry Lyndon, the IRA was seriously active in Ireland, which is where we were filming. A production manager got into a fight with the IRA over, you know, whatever, because they're basically like Teamsters in Ireland. They run the unions and everything. And so what happened is they put a bomb on the set. They blocked off all the bridges and set buses on fires in Dublin. And my father was filming in the middle of Dublin. And they said, if you don't get rid of your film crew and your family by midnight, we're going to kidnap your children. And we were in another part of Dublin. We had a house, you know, everything. It would be like if somebody just said to you right now, pack your entire house up, all your clothes and all your animals, and be ready to leave in 5 hours. And that's what we did. And, you know, my father, Julie took us on this crazy, nightmarish escape where we took a boat back to England. I ended up in a motel for 3 months with the curtains drawn, and we weren't allowed to leave. And my father had to go on making the film, but myself, my sisters, and my mother, we were hidden from the IRA because they had threatened to kidnap us. So it's like, I do have some reality on what it's like to live under a sort of a mad opposition to your very existence. And, you know, of course, my father received many death threats in his life, believe it or not. It's absolutely true. When he sought help from the Scotland Yard to, you know, protect him from one particular man that had literally like threatened to kill him, and he was going to come from America to England. And the British police said, well, sorry, unless he actually turns up at your door and tries to kill you, there's nothing we can do. So it's like literally, you have no idea about the reality of these things unless you go through them and you experience the fear, the confusion, the total chaos that it makes of your life. You don't know who, when somebody approaches you, you don't know why they're approaching you. So Suzie is taking on all of these types of risks, but in this kind of, you know, she definitely is well known amongst activists. But who would know? Who would ever even read about it in a paper if they killed her? I mean, I'm not trying to upset you, Suzie, if you're listening, but I'm just saying that at least, you know, celebrities have some, you know, scope within their own fame to get a little protection. But all of us individually don't have much protection. That's why we all have to work together. That's why we have to help someone who really is talented and brave enough to do this kind of work by giving, you know, $20 to this. I mean, like if there are, you know, 2,000 people that give $20, that is a meaningful amount of money. But it would be even better if you would just, you know, think about all the silly things that you spend money on and just for a month go without them, and instead give them to someone who's ultimately fighting for you, your children's future, and the future of every living thing on this planet. Because the people that are in charge, and you know, I think if you listen to Suzie's very interesting recent videos on how the intel agencies work, you're going to realize that this is only going to get worse. And it's going to be a miracle if we can stomp this out of existence. I think the best we can do is at least put some regulations on it and some controls, so we have some, possibility to fight it legally. But Jesus Christ, the president of the United States is being outrageously attacked in exactly the same way. I mean, lawfare, corruption, the CIA, the FBI, this is becoming like a crescendo of either face it, the reality that we're facing, and do something about it, or just sit in the back and wait for the crash, because it's going to come, and it'll be like nothing you could have ever foreseen unless you really think about what this kind of level of oppression results in. And I think I've studied a lot of the Holocaust, and I've read a million things on the Holocaust, and I can see that everything, it's the same playbook. They isolate the group, they disempower them. We've got deplatforming, defunding, depersoning. It was the exact same thing they did to the Jews. And, I can only say Suzie is a bloody force of nature. She is a compassionate, intelligent, sorry, I feel like swearing, really brave human being. And to sign the letter in support of her, to help her really perform a legal fight that sets a precedent for all of us. This is also the same reason why Julian it must be saved, because it's not just Julian. And I mean, just Julian is quite enough of a reason to want to save him, but the precedent that it sets, every time something like that happens, we are more disempowered as humanity. So I have an incredible capacity to non-stop talk. So let you say something.
So maybe now, if Suzie would like to jump on the stream, I know she wanted to join you, Vivian.
I was actually just laughing as Viv said that she has the capacity to non-stop talk. I don't think I've had a fun conversation with Vivian Kubrick that has lasted less than 2.5 hours.
And that's not because it's just me talking.
Not an exaggeration. That's a literal estimation.
Right, but no, you must make it sound better. You make it sound like that you're patiently just listening to me for 2.5 hours, which actually might be sort of true.
Neither of us can shut up. We're always like, I just want to say one more thing, and next thing we know, it's been another 40 minutes. So I can only imagine how long the stream's going to run for now. But I'm so happy to see you.
Likewise, you look very beautiful. We're all looking rather beautiful. This is. I think this is a spiritual expression rather than pure makeup. Anyway, ladies. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say, Taylor, I've watched you on a few of your presentations, and you've done so beautifully. You really, really are excellent at fronting this effort to protect Suzie. So I just wanted to say that while everyone's listening, because I have tweeted it to you. But
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And of course, I am unbelievably lucky, as I had mentioned earlier, that Suzie has been working with me and mentoring me. I am so lucky for that. And so a lot of what you're seeing in these interviews is because I'm being trained by one of the best out there. And I'm so grateful. I'm so lucky. So I'm glad that I'm able to represent this 1 versus 5i campaign well. And I've also had a lot of advice from Christy as well, who's also become my friend. Like I was saying, Suzie has an incredible ability to unite female activists.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and actually, I just want to say, Christy, as well, you've been doing an absolutely awesome job. I mean, I just think that the thing that is beautiful about everything that everyone's trying to do here is it is the future that I see for mankind, is this kind of camaraderie, this kind of high vibrational, I don't know how else to put it, a high vibrational intent for the best things to happen. And, I just think that will be the reason why we save mankind. It won't be because of anyone powerful that does it. I think that it's sort of a weird thing, but power seems to attract people who are the least suitable to be in power. So I think by and large, you can kind of ignore power in as much as you don't let it get out of control. And you instead seek out on a communal level, on a local level, on individual groups, this very high vibrational intention for mankind to have its consciousness raised, for there to be true liberty, and for us to have an exciting time in this universe instead of being on this kind of like gangster planet, which is what we presently have. But that's why it's so important for us to all join together and to be really optimistic that even just a small amount of your own intervention, your own help, like Commander X was saying, it's a force multiplier. You know, they say when there's people that write to the White House, you know, if they get 100 letters, they know that 10,000 people feel that way. And they're going to look at this. And because most of these people are very low vibration that are in the high powerful positions, they're bloody cowards. And if they think that there's a lot of people who are going to move against them, they back off. I mean, that doesn't solve the problem. By the way, I can hear something echoing of myself. Have you got your...
It's probably me. Sorry. It's funny that you said about power backing off. There, in Lynn's video interview, or in the interview of her that had cuts of video from various protest actions in it, we showed the police strangling one guy, strangling another guy, strangling a girl. She was unconscious and carrying her away. But we actually didn't show what happened at the end of that protest action after the girl was strangled to unconsciousness and carried away. What actually happened at the end of that protest action is the crowd was so upset and angry, righteously angry about what had happened, that they actually grouped up about 1,000 people and they chased these 25 cops out of the square. And you see the crowd just descending upon these police officers, and the police officers freaking out and literally backtracking all of the way out. And then their commander actually called a stand down order, and all the cops filed out of the square in a single line and left the square to the members of the public. And it's kind of, for me, that's like an analogy of what you're talking about, which is they came in all gung-ho, they had their weapons and their handcuffs, and they were ready to beat little girls and do whatever. But when a large enough group of members of the public directly confronted them, they put their tails between their legs and couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Well, those are the kinds of behaviors that we hope for our future police force. But I have a terrifying feeling that if we don't, really change the way our governments operate, we're going to be looking at militarized, opposition at any, demonstration, which is what I'm slightly worried about. But I do think that you're right. I think hopefully, in fact, it makes me think of things. I just think it's very important that part of this activism involves really, really reaching out to the police forces on this planet, because they are human beings too. And I know police officers and I know military people. Some of them are some of the bloody nicest people I can think of, but they're in this terrible situation where it's like the military, you can't disobey an order kind of thing. And I just think that we also have to take care of the police in the sense that we create new laws for them so that they actually have some capacity to use their own humanity in situations. It's that classic thing, right? Where soldiers, most soldiers always aim above the heads of the people they're supposed to be shooting because they don't want to kill them. Do you know about this? It's like incredible. It's like 80% of all the bullets shot just fly everywhere else. Very, very few soldiers actually aim to kill. And I just, oh my God, I'm hearing myself echoing again. Anyway, so I think,
to be honest with you, the problem is that my kids put my third headset in a month through the washing machine, the laundry, and so it totally destroyed them. And I didn't get another headset in time for tonight, so I'm really sorry. I'm using onboard sound. That's probably echoing.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I just hope that it's not like mucking up the stream. But anyway, look, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you girls get on with it.
I'm going to answer a few questions actually, because there are some people in chat who want to ask some things. There was one quite important one that I saw. Someone was asking for specifics about the status of my asylum application. I don't think I've actually qualified that as well as I should have. So in the denial, my asylum application was denied, but in the letter of denial, they actually made 2 references to the fact that I had not gotten refugee status. Refugee status is something you're supposed to get before you apply for asylum. Ed Snowden got refugee status in Hong Kong before he applied for asylum in Russia. Julian Assange got refugee status before he applied for asylum from Ecuador. This is standard practice. Unfortunately for me, I did go to try and get refugee status before I applied for asylum. However, the head of the refugees.ru refugee agency in Moscow, which is the official UNHCR agent for refugee processing here, took one look at my 300 pages of evidence that had Julian and WikiLeaks' name all through it and announced that she didn't like Julian Assange because he had published her meetings with the US ambassador in Cablegate. And it turns out that Chelsea Manning's Cablegate releases had her name peppered through some 100-odd documents in them. And so she refused to process my refugee application. And this has been a problem that has haunted me for the last 3 years. Because after refusing to process my application, I asked her for a letter saying that she was denying me. And she refused to give me a letter of denial. So she wouldn't accept me, but she wouldn't deny me either. And what that meant is I couldn't appeal. I couldn't do anything about it. I got stuck in this limbo. And yes, my lawyer was also present with me, and he's written a whole letter of testimony about her discriminating against me because of my association with WikiLeaks, etc. So when you then apply for asylum, literally the first question at the top of the form is, have you been recognized as a refugee? So I've had to tick no and then apply for asylum and be bereft of refugee status. Now that's a major problem for me. So a big part of when you read this open letter, you'll see that it's appealing to international bodies and agencies to intervene in my situation. So the reason that I am needing their assistance is because the only way that I can now get refugee status is if I get support from the UN at an international level and or other NGOs that could help to advocate for me on that front. Now, also in the denial, where it referenced twice my lack of refugee status, they actually went so far as to cite the piece of law around what constitutes a refugee. So the very clear message to me was, I need refugee status. I can't just apply for asylum without it. So that's a big part of why we've put this campaign together. Now, we have appealed the denial of the asylum on the grounds that I did introduce a bunch of new evidence. And they acknowledged receipt of the evidence, but they didn't address the content. They didn't actually say anything about the contents of the evidence. And some of the evidence is like the letters from Christine Assange, the letters from Kim.com, John Kiriakou, other letters from my New Zealand legal team, et cetera, et cetera. And that needs to be addressed because, I mean, it's pretty obvious that if people like that are saying I need protection, that I do in fact need protection. That said, I do think Russia got put in a difficult situation because I haven't been recognized as a refugee by UNHCR. So I think that we're going to have to go this path of getting refugee status internationally in order for me to be able to submit a successful asylum application. You'll notice also that Commander X said earlier that his successful asylum application, he was first granted emergency refugee status. So that's yet another case where the refugee status laid the groundwork for a successful application for asylum. So it's just bad luck for me, unfortunately, that someone who has whose name has been published in WikiLeaks, turns out to be the executive director of the refugee agency in Russia. It's very unfortunate for me, but there's not really much I can do about it without some serious heavyweight international assistance. The other thing is that I'm a Kiwi journalist and a mother who's been living in exile for 3.5 years in Russia, and basically no media has followed my case at all, which seems pretty counterintuitive. Like, I would expect as a New Zealand citizen that if another New Zealand citizen was in exile in Russia because of political persecution, that I would hear about that and that I would know about the case. In fact, I would consider it to be highly unusual that there is total media silence about my situation. And ultimately, the only way that we're going to get media to pay attention to the very obvious fact that my situation is newsworthy is by us campaigning and educating them and supplying them with all of the information on a platter, like we've done with this new website, to get them to raise awareness about my situation and help to put some pressure on some NGOs to actually dedicate some resources to intervening and to helping my kids and I. So that's a more fine-grained answer as to my current status. Now, I'm really lucky because Russia could have detained and deported me. They haven't. I think they know full well that I'm a legitimate target, but I do think that they need me to follow the approved international processes of gaining refugee status before they can seriously consider doing anything on the asylum front. And I'm actually kind of sympathetic to that. So now it's just a matter of making that happen. Someone's
okay, sorry. We were all on mute there. I just want to put in my 10 cents here. I think that there is a real, and this would be something you'd be brilliant at strategizing, Suzie. There's a real problem in that, like all systems of true organized crime, they've kind of got everything cornered. They've got the media cornered. They've got the banks. Well, the banks are really sort of the ultimate in power on this planet. But let's just say they've got all the sort of money platforms, the mainstream media, the police force, the military, blah, blah, blah. And so the really important thing is that we've got to find a way. And I think it's happening because more and more people are moving away from mainstream media because it's so farcical, right? And I mean people that think. I don't think any of us are going to manage to persuade people who, for whatever reason, don't tend to think, don't tend to do anything active in the world. And in that way, it's sort of, it doesn't matter that much that they're not going to hear about it on CNN because they're not the kind of people that are going to stand up and stick their necks out anyway. So, but I do think it's very important that people do try as best as they can to contact their local newspapers where perhaps there's a little less oppression on those lines. And, just use the internet, like Commander X said, to communicate, send emails to some of your friends. I mean, there is a way around this. And, I can't remember because I'm too rubbish at math to remember it properly. But I remember in school we had some kind of thing where a Chinaman said, if you put 1 grain of rice and times it by 2 on a chessboard and give me what ends up being all the rice on the chessboard, then I'll take that as payment. And, because the guy that's agreed to it didn't know math, he didn't realize that by the final square on the chessboard, you practically got all the rice in the world, or something. I think that's what we're capable of. You put a little rice on this square, on the next square, you put 2 and then 4, and then this is the end of my mathematical abilities here. And you keep multiplying it, you'd be absolutely shocked what an impact you can have in the world. I mean, for God's sake, Julian Assange, I know that not all of us are as brave or as have the facility or ability to do what he did, but I'm just saying he was one guy, right? One guy. And Suzie is one girl, and she's done a hell of a lot. And I just think that don't underestimate yourselves. If you communicate with 10 of your friends and have a little get together and a talk and show them, some of Suzie's work, I think you just need to explain to your friends that the reason why you need to support someone like Suzie is that we need people who have that ability to fight for our corner. And we're not going to get anyone in power fighting for our corner. That's not the kind of human being that gets attracted to power. They're much more self-interested, with perhaps some very, very rare exceptions. Anyway, ladies, Taylor, Christy.
So
have you?
I'm sorry.
I see that. I see that Kimber is on here. Are you going to come on and have a chat, Kimber? The person that does all the. Sorry, I'm being so presumptuous, inviting someone onto the stream. I just know that Kimber's done a lot of graphic work, and actually, you know, Kimber and I actually have loads of chats. In fact, we were sort of DJ texting each other, like, you know, really good records the other day. But she has done some amazing work, and she certainly, and we've had the same kinds of conversations of like, you know, oh God, can I carry on with this? What will be the repercussions? Where will my life go if I spend it, you know, getting right out there and vulnerable to authorities? What will happen to me? And all I can say is, what will happen to all of us if we don't? You know, I mean,
this is really a campaign and a fight that affects everybody.
Yes.
It's for people to think, okay, you know, we're fighting against the Five Eyes intelligence agencies. Well, I'm not a, you know, journalist or an activist, so it doesn't impact me. That's not true. It absolutely does. You know, look at the mass surveillance state that we're living in. Just within the past 20 years, surveillance has increased dramatically. And like you were saying, Vivian, there's no reason to believe it's going to stop unless people on the ground take some initiative, sign the open letter, go to protectsuzie.com, donate if you can donate. And if you cannot donate, that's acceptable. Not everybody has the luxury of being able to do so, but just circulating the link. All of these things are so helpful and beneficial, because ultimately this is a fight for all of us. So it's really important we get behind, you know, the one person right now who is taking them on, and that's Suzie.
Yeah, and I just want to say, sorry, can I just say, is that Julian, you know, he said that he saw WikiLeaks as the kind of the people's intel agency. You know, this is our government that we've got here. What we do together is our government. We don't have a government serving us. None of us do. And we can create that kind of government if we work together, intelligently exchange information, and let's put it very, very, very simply, everyone can afford $1. Nearly everyone can afford $5. And if 1,000 of you give $1, that's $1,000. You know, there is power, and there are ways of helping, and you have to consider yourself as the government that should be there, but it's just not. And we're going to have to make that government together. We're going to have to represent each other. Suzie is a representative. I called Julian Assange when I was at the Belmarsh prison, you know, the statesman for mankind. You know, we have to appoint and back and organize our own government through the simple fact that we haven't got any other options. This is not something where we can go, well, maybe there's another way of doing this, where we just sit back, you know, drink down a beer, and somehow magically all our problems are going to go away. We've really got to do something, not every day, all day, you know, every moment of your existence. Leave that to Suzie, because God knows that's what she does, or Taylor, or Christy. You know, Christy has babies, right? You have, yeah. How many have you got?
Well, I just wanted to summarize, because you were talking about what we all can do, and I just thought it was a really good time to summarize just some of the things that we learned tonight. I really liked what Graham said about that there are more of us than there are of them, and to really think about that if this can happen, you know, we talk a lot about Julian Assange on the vigils and through Unity for J, but if this could happen to Julian, that this could happen to Suzie. And if this can happen to Suzie, that this can happen to all of us. And we heard from Lynn Nye, and we heard about what happened in New Zealand from another perspective. And now we have this Protect Suzie website with all of the information and all of these amazing timelines that Suzie's team has built. And really, you can link to just about every single detail on there to find supporting sources and evidence of this now. And, Commander X talked about how he had never signed an open letter in 10 years, and he's fully feels like he's in a position now where he can start supporting other activists, and Suzie's the first. And so I just think that we have learned a lot. I want to encourage people to go to the website tonight, start looking around, reading the information, and read the open letter and sign. And definitely, if you're able, to donate as well.
Yeah, tonight we had so many fantastic guests on. All of them share one thing in common in particular, and that is that they know Suzie personally. We are hearing from people who know her, who have, in Graham's case, had visited her in Russia and, spent time with her and was able to see the conditions that she's in and knows her personally. Vivian as well, who's a dear friend of Suzie's, who's able to talk about her work and how valuable her friendship is, and Suzie's activism in particular. And then also it was really powerful to hear from Lynn Nye, who knew Suzie when she was still living in New Zealand. And one really powerful thing that Lynn Nye said, and remember, this is a New Zealand citizen who was subjected to many similar forms of targeting that Suzie was subjected to while in New Zealand. She said specifically, if you're targeted in New Zealand, the only way out is to get out, to leave New Zealand. So hearing all of these voices tonight and hearing them share their experiences with Suzie is really beneficial, and should really motivate and empower everybody to take some initiative, sign a letter, donate, share the link, become active in the campaign. There are so many ways to do so, and it's important, again, to rally behind her, somebody who is already taking up this necessary fight.
Sorry, I just want to add something. That I think it's important people understand that the reason why Suzie decided to do this, to put out all that information, is that one of the main things that oppressive power does is they try to make nothing of you. They try to lie about you, to discredit you. And you only need to compare what currently is happening in the Western world to its natural progression, which is the Chinese social scoring system, where I don't know if any of you have watched any of the information that's come out there, but literally they have public billboards where somebody can put up a letter saying, Joe Chang, is a loser and did these terrible things. I know this for a fact. And then somebody in that, who's sort of a low down little minion of the social scoring thing, sends that to some kind of, authority. And before you know it, you become targeted by their social scoring system. You put one foot wrong. Even if you cross the street and you do it and you jaywalk, you start getting points taken away. So that is the natural progression from where this is going. That's why it's so important that someone like Suzie gets to put the actual facts with the hard evidence of the truth about herself. Because all the people that attack and besmirch her good name and lie about her are the same kind of entities that exist in China in the social scoring, where they put your name up on a public board and say, I saw him, defiling the picture of, Prime Minister Jin Shi or whatever his name is. It's like, we don't want to get there. And we are, we're seeing a manifestation of it in social media. And Suzie has brilliantly, oh my God, it's so brilliant the way she's done this. She's showing how one stream of timeline of what she's doing, coordinated on this side with the oppression that she then received, is, what more evidence can a human being do to show what's happening to them, and that it shouldn't be questioned again? She's got all the information there. And that you can, when you see people saying negative things about Suzie, they are part of the oppression. They are not, if they are real human beings, they're so brainwashed that they don't know what they're doing. And they come under the category of forgive them for they know not what they do. They're just so socially engineered. They just don't know what they're doing. And then there's other people whose job it is to discredit Suzie. And they're part of the, third-party intel agency, private companies that attack someone. I just think that the reason to read Suzie's site, Protect Suzie, is so that you can start to get a real slice of reality of what's coming to you, if we don't stop this. And look up social scoring in China and watch those documentaries and watch the hell that these people live through. And by the way, sorry, I have to say this. Did anyone see the video of the little Chinese guy who said to the local Chinese police officer, oh yeah, those bastards confiscated a motorbike? They had him in like a medieval body clamp. Did you see this, Suzie?
No.
And they said, they were like saying, did you say that the police were, sort of bad for confiscating and wrong for confiscating that motorbike? And the little guy was clamped into this chair. Say, no, the police were right. I'm telling you, that's where we're going if we don't stop this. So,
no, I think we're already there, because when we studied the Snowden documents, NSA was hiring executives and tech guys from credit scoring companies, and they were taking the algorithms from credit scoring companies for use of the intelligence agencies. I personally think, and with pretty sound reason, that there's a very high likelihood that they are already applying credit or social scores to us. It's just they're not letting us in on that process or telling us about it. And the question isn't so much whether or not they will do it or when they will do it, but when they will allow us to know that they are doing it. So I'd just put that out there for one thing. Secondarily, in terms of when you say, this is happening to Suzie now, it could happen to all of us, the big problem here is the privatization of the targeting, and they are subcontracting to private for-profit companies, private investigations firms, private intelligence firms, who are the ones who are actually engaged on the ground in targeting. So in the 20-
wait, Suzie, why are they choosing? Well, I know, but why are they choosing private companies?
They don't. It's become a Ponzi scheme, right? To make more money, they need more targets. This whole private military-industrial complex, it all tracks back to Donald Rumsfeld's total force agenda, where he immunized all of the private contractors of the Department of Defense and the military-industrial complex. He gave them the same rights as the US Army had and whatnot. It was a whole agenda to bring all of these private for-profit companies under the military-industrial complex banner. And now targeting is a for-profit industry. There are companies, social media companies, that do nothing other than sit and create lists of social media users who engage in political commentary or different types of commentary, and then they go and sell these lists to the private intelligence companies who the data is coming from the bottom and being pushed up, and also targeting data is coming from the top and going all the way down. So it's not the CIA or the NSA who are chasing me around in New Zealand. The CIA and the NSA are at the top level of the data stack, and they have the data of everybody. Targets are nominated, and then they're passed down to contractor, to subcontractor, to these local chumps, local goons, teams of them who actually go and perform the actual targeting on the ground. And so this is the scary part, is because it's an industry and because it's for profit, they will continue to expand the number of targets. And I saw that very much in New Zealand. In New Zealand, I warned years ago that it wouldn't just be activists that would be targeted, that because of the for-profit nature, it would expand throughout every sector of society. In that 2018 State Services Commission report, yes, activists were targeted, yes, political parties were targeted, yes, journalists were targeted, but guess who else was targeted? Insurance claimants were targeted. Historic state child abuse claimants were targeted. Anybody who had any problem with any government agency was targeted. And these are like obscure government aids. This is like the Ministry of Fisheries can surveil, like order a private intelligence company to surveil you. Like the health and whatever it is department, human services department can have people spy on you. There was 12 government agencies that had been employing these contractors to go and spy on people. And this is just going to get worse by the day. Corporations can hire people to go and spy on you. That's the whole point of private intelligence companies. They contract to governments, they contract to militaries, but they also contract to anybody who has money. Your rich ex-boyfriend can hire someone to stalk you and spy on you. Like, you take your pick. Anybody who has a beef with anybody for any reason can hire a team of goons to fuck their lives up. And this is happening on a daily basis. So we're way past the point, to be honest, of it just being activists or just being journalists or just being politicians or politically active people. We are already at the point where anybody who dissents against anybody is potentially a target. And it's like
sorry, you know what it's like? It's like the Pinkertons. Do you know about that? It was like in the end of the 19th century, was literally, except they were more like strong arm intel agencies, the Pinkertons. If anybody doesn't know about this, then you're obviously not cowboy movie fans like I am. But yeah, the Pinkertons, look that up. They were like the first sort of thug intel on in America anyway. Listen, I just want to add to what you were saying, that I also think that it's like the prison system in America. You know, they've got a lot of privately owned prisons, and so they have to have prisoners. But I also think that there's an element of plausible deniability, like, oh, it was just this, private company. They got a bit, wild. It's not our fault. But also, I think it's because they can operate outside government and constitutional law, right? Because it's a private enterprise. So I would think that's more than just big business. It's like everything criminal. There's a reason why they need it. It's the same reason why nobody reads any local papers, but they still print them, and I still have to keep throwing them in the trash because who's going to read them? There's little kind of local city newspapers. It's because the law says. Sorry, what?
I'd like to show everyone something really quickly, because one of the things that they say in the asylum application is, why couldn't you seek redress in your country of origin? So in that 2018 State Services Commission report in New Zealand that found 12 government agencies had been hiring the security contractor, intelligence surveillance company, Thompson Clark Investigations Limited, as a result of that report, the State Services Commission referred the private security company to the police to be investigated. And several months went by and nothing happened. And a New Zealand journalist went to the police and said, what's happening with this investigation? And I'd like to show you what the New Zealand police said. They said that they forgot to start the investigation. A police investigation into spying on earthquake victims has been delayed after a top cop forgot to progress it. Sorry, my browser is playing some random crap from the website that is on. They forgot to investigate a company that was involved in spying on people, a whole range of people across New Zealand. So this is the standard of redress. This is the ability to get redress, even when there is finally a full-on public inquiry and criminal referrals for criminal investigation. The police will not take any action. And incidentally, 3 months after saying that they forgot to start the investigation, they said that they'd decided not to progress the investigation and would not be doing so, even though our government had told the police to investigate. So that's the current state of things. Someone said it just skipped their mind. Yeah, exactly. Nationwide scandal of epic proportions, and they forgot to investigate. So,
actually, I just must tell you something. I was listening to Larry Nichols, who is sort of like the henchman for the Clintons, and he decided to save his soul and tell the world the truth about the Clintons. He said that Hillary Clinton said to him, whenever you make a court appearance and you're asked a difficult question, just say, I can't remember. and there's nothing they can do about it. So clearly, if the police officer says, "Oh, I forgot," it's sort of the, other flip side of the coin. I forgot, I can't remember. It's like you could just play that off, and legally there's nothing that can be done about it. So I just think criminals operate the same way. You know what, Suzie, you should apply yourself one day to look at the playbook of the criminals on this planet and write it down, because that would be a service to mankind. It really would. Because they all do the same shit.
I've been doing that, Vivian. I've been doing it by reading NSA documents and reporting on them. Because for me, that's the biggest mafia on planet Earth, the global network of the Western intelligence agencies and their so-called partners. We have to wrap this soon because we're actually an hour over time, and we could very easily be another hour over time. I'd just like to answer one question that somebody asked. They wanted to know, am I going to do any other streams? And as usual, I have a fairly long answer for that. I would love to not do any more streams because, to be honest with you, I need a break. I need to get my butt back into the gym. I need to spend some time with my kids. I need to do a lot of things other than being on stream. However, what I would really like is, if I'm doing streams again, for it not to be about trying to save my life, for it not to be about trying to have a country to live in, for it not to be about trying to raise funds to sue the agencies who destroyed my life, but for it to be about studying the last 1,000 Snowden files, NSA files that I haven't got to study yet, for it to be about different projects that I want to do. And so that's really my hope. My hope is that we can push hard on outreach for this campaign, get some progress on getting me refugee status, refile a new asylum application that could actually be accepted, and be able to settle in here. I also get asked all the time, why don't you go to China? Why don't you go to Iran? Why don't you go to Mexico? Why don't you go wherever? First of all, it's actually not safe for me to travel, and that's why I applied for asylum in 2016, because the Snowden files revealed that another New Zealand activist who was targeted, non-violent, democratic activist, his passport was cancelled. His house was raided, and he went to Australia. They raided him. They cancelled his passport. He couldn't travel. And the legal advice to me is, if I am in transit and my government decides to cancel my passport because they don't want me to go to China or Iran or Mexico, wherever the hell, then I'm in like even bigger trouble than I'm in right now. We've been here for over 3 years. I don't speak a lot of Russian, but I speak enough to navigate my way around. We are comfortable here. It is familiar territory for us now, and we absolutely don't want to leave. We certainly don't want to go and start all over again in a new country with a new language and not knowing the terrain, not knowing anyone. That would be even more traumatic for us than our current situation. So I definitely want to remain in Russia, at least until my government gets some sanity and separates itself from this insane global network, and stops serving the interests of foreign countries and starts serving the interests of its own citizens. When the day comes that I'm safe to go back to New Zealand, I'll be very happy to, but we are not there yet, and we're nowhere near it, quite frankly. What else did I want to say? I guess that's about it. I'm really grateful to everybody who is helping me. I have an amazing team of people. You get to see a small selection of them on stream, but there's a lot more behind the scenes who work with me daily. That's the other thing I wanted to say. I got a lot of compliments tonight about helping Taylor, helping Christy, helping different people. I want you all to know that really all I'm doing is relaying the gifts of knowledge that have been given to me. For a long time, I never really talked about Julian or my conversations with him or my dealings with him out of respect, and primarily because I'm a privacy activist and I respect his privacy as well. But I can tell you that Julian gave me advice constantly. Julian would watch my interviews and he'd be like, Suzie, do this different, try this, do this. And he'd send me links links from media schools saying, try this technique and try this and try that, or change, just advice about my writing and stuff. And I directly pass that advice on to other people. Most of the time I don't tell them that it's come from him out of respect. Sometimes I do. When I wanted to help Christy with her lighting, I literally went and fished out a link that Julian had given me about how to set up my lighting, how to have backlighting, how to have lights positioned in front of you. And I passed that on to Christy. So Christy's all like, oh, Susie's helped me so much, but I didn't know a goddamn thing about lighting. I had no idea about how to be on live stream. I had people like Julian saying, hey, you have some raw talent. Now you need some technique as to actually how to do this better and how to do it properly. And I pass that on. When I'm talking to Taylor about interviewing skills, I'm telling her, go and watch this Glenn Greenwald interview. Listen to the way that Glenn Greenwald phrases his answers and his questions. Study it and copy it, because Glenn Greenwald has some of the best interview skills of anybody on this planet. So I feel like all I'm really doing is just like relaying gifts of information and skills that have been given to me to people who I think are worthy. So in that sense, I'm really just a conduit. I'm just like a middle node in a network. And I'm just so lucky that I've had people, even in New Zealand, I had very experienced Kiwi activists who had been around decades before I had. When I was in nappies, they were protesting, literally. And those people taught me so much. And the other thing is just the experience of it. Every movement that I've been involved in has taught me something about how to do things differently in the next movement. You learn lessons from everything that you do, and then you bring them to bear each time you get a second chance or another chance at it, or building something great. So it's really about evolving as an activist. I don't think it's any particular talent on my part. But I do love and I do believe that empathy is the key to all of this, because if we didn't care, we wouldn't act. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I notice in terms of people who support me versus people who deride me or smear me, is that if you smear someone, or if you don't believe someone, or if you don't support someone, there's kind of like the easy way out, because then you don't have to do anything, right? It's like, Susie's lying, therefore I don't have to actually take any action to help to protect her or support her family, or, Susie's wrong about the NSA, therefore I don't have to challenge the NSA. That's like the easy, unconscionable but easy route, right? But the really good, beautiful people who really, really care, they care enough to get off their butts and do something. And that's really what all these activism movements are about. Like, I'm talking about needing intervention from international bodies to help get me refugee status, but every activist, what they're really performing is an intervention. They perform interventions on issues. When Julian's name had been turned to mud after the 2016 election, it took an intervention of people who cared about him to group up together and to say, no, we will not turn our backs on this person. No, we will not be told that the politically correct thing to do is to hate on him and talk shit about him and not help him and leave him to rot. No, we will get off our butts, and even if there is a social or political price to pay, we will stand up and we'll advocate for this person, and we will continue to grow our numbers as we do it until it becomes socially acceptable to support him again. And that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud about with Unity for J, is I feel like Unity for J won that fight of making it socially acceptable to support Julian again. And people weren't scared about their own reputations or their own social network anymore, because the mass of people were very visibly on those streams week in and week out, coming together in support of him. And so we got off our butts and we acted, and there was a positive impact and a positive result. To me, that's what activism is. And these girls that I work with here, and the others that I work with in my movements, I handpick them. I watch carefully and I handpick them. They are the people who are self-motivated. They are the people who care, who have a massive heart, and they're the people who do the work. Who get off their butts and do the work. And I think it was Taylor I said to, someone was saying, thank you, me. And I said, in my movements, every person earns their place. Or was that you, Christy? I said, it was Christy, she's saying, I said, every single person earns their place. I don't put you in that place. You put yourself in that place. You put yourself there through empathy and through drive, willingness to act. I don't work with anybody who I have to kick along every day. And none of the people I've worked with would ever have worked with me if they had to kick me along every day either. It's all about the empathy and the drive. And so that's really all I've got to say on that front.
Well said, Suzie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Viv, I've got to say, I've been paid a lot of compliments tonight. I'm actually terrible at accepting compliments too, as Vivian.
You are. You're dreadful accepting compliments, but okay.
I get really shy and then I just kind of shut up, to be honest. But you said something to me in one of our last phone calls about me. And it was something that I actually thought, you know what, if someone's going to say something nice about me, I'd actually like it to be that. And you said, the thing I love about you, Suzie, or what's so remarkable about you is that every time they kick you down, you get up and you keep going. Remember that?
Yeah, because I was telling you how I don't. Yeah, no, I remember it very distinctly because I think that this is part of the life of an artist, part of the life of an activist, is that your ability to isolate your own sense of yourself and your purpose and insulate it rather than insulate it against the attacks of the world. I mean, that's one of the key characteristics of productive artists and productive activists, is that you have that ability to not be wounded by, you know, for better or worse, people who can't appreciate what you're doing, whatever that reason is. I mean, I this sounds very highfalutin, but you know, it's like the classic throwing pearls before swine. You know, your wisdom, your efforts. There are many people that just don't have the capacity to see what value it has. And I think the people that follow Unity for J and that follow you, these are very high beings. You know, they are high consciousness beings, and they have the capacity, in addition to seeing what's right and what's important, they have the courage, which I think has to do with a certain level of spiritual sophistication. I don't know how else to put it. You know, you have to have that capacity, which I think Suzie does, to examine it rather indifferently. You know, like whatever's going on, it doesn't bother you because you know that it's a manifestation of unconsciousness. You know, these are people that either have the wrong information or have the right information, but are too scared to do anything because they aren't evolved enough. You know, you know, I think that it's true that courage is not just sort of blind, you know, sort of do it and not worry. Courage is that you know how dangerous it is, but you do it anyway. And that has a spiritual sophistication about it. You know, I mean, I think of Socrates always, where he said to the guys that were going to kill him, you know, they had decided that he had gone too far with his ideas and that he must die. He said, there's nothing you can do to hurt me. You only hurt yourselves by killing me. And I think that speaks to two things. Our spiritual consciousness being an eternal thing, and those things that you do to others ultimately only hurt yourself. So the people that are hurting Suzie, ultimately, the terrible irony and paradox is they hurt themselves by hurting someone like Suzie, who's trying to make the world a better place. They hurt themselves when they say, no, Julian's just a narcissist and he can walk out the embassy anytime he likes. You know, they are irresponsible in carrying on those little seeds that were sown by social engineers and, you know, propaganda. It was irresponsible of them. And they didn't have the consciousness to really take responsibility and think things through. And so they forwarded something that was terribly damaging, ultimately, to themselves. That's where this stuff gets very, very heartbreaking. Anyway, Suzie seems to have disappeared.
No, I'm still here. I'm just pondering what you're saying because it's very, very, very true. And same thing for me. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time, and I berate myself about those mistakes all the time. And I plot to myself how I can not make those mistakes again. And I watch very carefully the actions and the words of people who I respect and who I see as being more advanced than me, spiritually, intellectually, or however, and I attempt to do justice to their example. And I think that's all of us can do ultimately.
Yeah, sorry, I went off without finishing the idea about you getting up. Your ability, again, I say this is why we need to support Suzie. Suzie has an almost like Terminator-like ability to just sort of get up, you know, or like I think of those zombie movies where the sort of zombie has like half an arm missing and it still kind of gets up and starts, you know. Suzie just, no matter what happens to her, she just has this almost, you know, unbelievable, almost heartbreaking ability to fucking just get up after she's been smashed down. And she just sort of goes, right, you're not going to take on an IT manager and not, you know, what was it?
That's right.
Yeah, they don't know what they've come up against dealing with a bloody IT manager. I know how to organize this information. And it's like, you know, she talks as
that's where the timelines on protectsuzie.com came from.
Right. But you see, I love that about you. And that truly, Suzie, here comes a compliment. Take it, okay? This is one of the incredible gifts that you have, is your bloody strength. And I was saying to you, you malign yourself when you say it's just stubbornness. You truly have that kind of strength that we see in bloody adventure movies where, you know, they fall down a mine shaft. You know.
I want people to know. I still cry. Okay, I mean, I really feel like people need to hear this, you know. For the like 5-day period before, maybe 6-day period before my asylum decision was going to come in, everybody was saying to me, you're going to get it, you're going to get it, you're going to get it. But I didn't feel inside me that I was going to get it. I didn't feel that the answer was going to be yes. And I was miserably depressed for that whole 6-day period. I was stressed out. I was so worried. I mean, this had been such a long process, 3.5 years or whatever. And then after I got the decision, I mean, really, to be honest, when I was sitting there in the office with the decision, I was just thinking like, well, fuck, they're not arresting me. Thank God. They're not detaining me. I'll get to go home. Like I'm not getting the asylum, but at least I still get to see my kids, be in my apartment. Then for about 2 days, I was just completely numb. For about 2 or 3 days, I was completely numb. And it took like that period of time before something clicked in my brain and I went, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then I go and talk to the team and I start organizing and planning and everything else. And as soon as I'm organizing and planning and I have the vision of where I want to go, I feel like me again. I feel totally fine. But I do get depressed. I mean, I did get so stressed out that I got like literally a autoimmune disorder and my hair was falling out in humongous chunks, as you know. So I don't want people to think just that I'm the Terminator, I'm super strong and whatever else, because it's not accurate. And I feel like I do have to show the entire picture to people because I am vulnerable and sometimes I am depressed and sometimes I am really stressed out. It is a whole picture. It's a holistic thing. But yes, I do have that moment where I come back to myself and I go, right, life, you know, gave me a shit sandwich. Well, we're going to turn it into 10 better sandwiches and we're going to go and have a fucking picnic one way or another. Like, that's...
Well, exactly. I did say, like, you get up from being attacked. And I just want to say the parallels here, I keep seeing it. The parallels between being an artist and being an activist are so comparable because you sort of are on your own and you are attacked by the world. And I say this with knowledge of the amazing things that happened to my father that I witnessed and went through with him. You know, he made some of the most brilliant films ever, and yet he was torn to shreds. He was attacked in the most unbelievable ways. And I just, you know, the ability to realize that as an artist, as an activist, you pull back from all that madness and you realign yourself, which is really what you do, Suzie. And then you come back to the world stronger for the knowledge of how the world works and with an even greater sense of purpose, because you want to give the world what you know as a, and I'm going to say as a higher being. It's a higher state of consciousness. you're giving to the world the opportunity for them to lift and raise their own consciousness. And that's why I always bang on about this, even in Unity for J or in any of these streams, is that I'm just going to say, if we don't do it, who the hell is going to do it? You know, it's like that thing in Harry Potter. You know, wait.
Much easier to do it together as well. It's so much easier, because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Is, you know, how would I be if I didn't have the types of support, emotional support that I have in my life? How would I be if I didn't have you? If I didn't have Christine? If I didn't have my fucking amazing activist team? Amazing. I mean, I couldn't have dreamed like 8 years ago that I'd get to work with the caliber of people that I get to work with now. We are just, I mean, when was the last time we had drama in our activist team? Like never, ever. Not even one sentence of it, because we're all so fucking awesome, quite frankly. It certainly wasn't like that in the first 10 movements I was involved in, you know. We have, together we can do stuff that we simply can't do apart. And I couldn't have pulled off this website by myself if it was just me. I couldn't have pulled off this stream by myself if it was just me. So,
can I just ask Christy something? Because sorry, that's so rude of me.
Go for it.
I just want to ask Christy, you have children. You must have an incredibly full-on existence, just being a mom. I'm really curious what went through your heart, what went through your mind when you realized, wait, I need to actually step up and really take the position that you now hold, which is actually a position of tremendous responsibility. What went through your mind and your heart?
I think Christine Assange really spoke to me from a perspective of another mother, and following her and hearing her talk about Julian and her son and the pain she was going through really spoke to me. And I mean, that sort of coincided with when Unity for J was starting to open up the Discord and tell people they wanted volunteers. And it was sort of an awakening that I needed to get involved. And it was something that sometimes I feel like was something bigger than myself pushing me to do this, and something I really believed in. And it was something I finally couldn't ignore anymore. And the further I got into it, the more it has given me new life and lightened me up. And it's something I enjoy. It's something I love. And I love the people I work with and the people I've grown to know over the last almost 2 years now. And yeah, it just keeps me going. Like it could be stressful, it can be heavy, it can be a lot of work, but I love it. And yeah, it just kind of became its own, became its own life force, I think, for me.
Yeah, I totally relate. Sorry, I totally relate to that.
Chrissy has so much to give, and I think that when you're a mother, you can, it's especially of young kids, it's very easy to get stuck in the rut of what can I give? I can give breakfast, I can give a diaper change, I can go to the park and play, I can read the book, I can whatever. But I think as an activist and particularly spokesperson, fronting media, doing interviews, putting together, coordinating, doing streams, etc., you're giving different skill sets to what you do in motherhood. And I think as a woman, that's really important to be able to express yourself in those different ways and to feel like you have a life outside of motherhood. I mean, my kids aren't that little anymore, so it's a different story for me. But I think, I mean, you see a lot of young mums actually start businesses for the same reason. It's because they need to have something in their life other than domestic slavery. And as satisfying as being with your kids is, you can actually end up feeling like a milk machine pretty easily. That's my, I mean, I'm not meaning to superimpose that on you, Christy, but that's my experience.
No, you're speaking a lot of truth. And you know, when I started volunteering for Unity for J, I never thought I would be a face of anything. I never thought I would be doing weekly vigils now on YouTube and live streaming and getting to talk to amazing people. I mean, I worked in the background of the Unity for J vigils and got to interact with people a little bit, but It's just this journey has just keeps building. And one of the things I wanted to say earlier was that I am so proud of the amazing team, not just because I'm a part of it, but because Suzie has empowered so many amazing activists, and a lot of us are women, honestly, and it's incredible, and we work amazingly well together. And I don't think I've ever felt so empowered in any job or role as I have, being part of this movement and being an activist. It's really quite an amazing thing to experience.
It really is. I mean, I can say when I hosted some of the vigils in the past, it was an incredible experience. And I kept saying to Suzie, thank you for asking me. I love doing this. And she was like going, really, at 4 a.m? You don't, like, but it was just like,
we did some
loved
very
it.
long vigils, some of those emergency vigils. We were going all night, and
yeah. But it was great. It was really great. And now, Taylor, I must ask you the same question. For my own self, I'm curious, what went through your heart and your mind to what made you sort of go, okay, I have no idea what this is going to do to my life or how it's going to change, but why did you decide that you wanted to get involved? Not necessarily even with Suzie, but just to give a shit about what is happening in the world. What happened in your heart, in your mind?
Yeah, so actually I kind of, I decided to go to grad school for journalism. And it was in that process that I started to learn some of the realities of how major institutions in the United States feel about journalism. And that was very much, or not feel about journalism, but how they treat it, I guess, or perceive it to be at its best. And I saw that especially played out with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks in particular. I've spoken about it extensively on the Action for Assange vigils, but I just noticed that there was this strange hostility within educational institutions, and I found it to be pretty problematic. And then I read when Google met WikiLeaks, and at the very end, they said that they actually discourage state universities from allowing people to use WikiLeaks as sources or to even do projects on it. And when I say projects, I'm not talking about a class project. I'm talking about like a thesis that's going to go into the academic record, something on that level. That is not okay. And so I thought this is very, odd to me, but I wasn't so surprised. So it was really that. And also the fact that nobody was alarmed, especially on April 11th, that Thursday, when Julian was arrested. I thought, for my colleagues, where is the outrage of this? Why are people laughing about this? This is really serious. And so that's when I decided to just be pretty vocal about it on Twitter. And I was able to connect with Andrew Smith. And I give him a lot of credit because he pushed me quite a bit, because I was very nervous to start these vigils. Like the night before, I was like, I can't do it. I was like, I don't want to do it. He's like, no, we are doing it. So I was like, okay. So I had to kind of get used to being a little bit uncomfortable. And I also do want to credit Graham Elwood as well, who told me that this was something bigger than myself and that I owed it to these causes and these issues that I cared dearly about, to put myself in an uncomfortable position, and that he felt that I could do that. So I also credit him with encouraging me, in addition to Suzie and Christy and Steve, who I also co-host with. So many great people I've met doing this. And I actually find it, I couldn't not be involved in this. By any means. I couldn't. And so I decided that, I'm not going to go the mainstream route at all with media. I decided that like a year ago, and I knew that it was going to be much more difficult to make a living doing journalism independently. But I thought that was a risk that I should and needed to take. And yeah, there's been some sacrifices that have come along with that. Nothing extreme, but you feel the backlash of it, but it's important. And again, I think that if we are not going to speak up, who will? But ultimately, I'm extremely grateful for everybody I've met with this past year. I can honestly say that 2019 has been an extraordinary year because I've been able to meet such wonderful people and create this foundation and be able to really initiate some change. So that's kind of what started for me. It's very specific, and later on I'll be able to talk more about it, and I intend to.
Well, I love that you said what brought you to this, I suppose, this part of the road, because we're all on a path, we're all going somewhere, but there's a certain part of the road that you can go on where you don't betray yourself, you don't sear your soul in half because you did something because it was more acceptable, or it was easier, or it looked like it would be more successful. Because, again, comparing it to an artist can either go commercial or they can just do what's in their soul. And, I think Commander X is the extreme. He seems to be willing to go down a foxhole, and fight the enemy. But I think you were saying, Christy, about, sorry, I just have to do this. I guess you can cut me off anytime you like, but I just have to say that the fact that so many women are drawn to this, I think that women are more naturally inclined to nurture and protect and love things and fight for things, because it's sort of what women have to do, not only for themselves, but for their children and for their husbands. Women do a lot behind the scenes for their husbands to help them. But what I'm getting at is, for the people who may still be watching this stream, I just say to you that all of us come to this with a sort of a wondering if this is going to fuck our lives up or ruin our chances. This is for your soul. And if you don't do this for your soul, your life is going to be shit. Because your soul, or whoever you are, is not going to allow you to live happily when you're betraying yourself, when you betray. Believe me, in show business, I have seen this so much, where people have, either tried to be commercial, or they've stepped on people's heads in order to get ahead, or they've betrayed people, or they've stabbed people in the back. And I only see them and who they are going in a steep decline as beings. They become vicious, they become paranoid, they become hurtful. And I think all of us want to do things that's for the best in the world. So everyone watching this, let us all do this together. What is best for all of us, for the world? Because I think ultimately that works out much better than standing in the back of the room and trying to not draw attention to yourself. That's not going to help anything. So please, sign Suzie's letter, send whatever money you can afford to send in, even if it's just $1. Tell 10 of your friends about this and educate yourself more and more, and take courage that you can make a difference. I will now say goodnight to you all and leave it to the lovely ladies who began this stream. So good night.
I just want to butt in and say something really quickly. Everything that Taylor said and that Christy said really resonated with me, because I had the same motivations and the same thoughts and the same experiences coming into activism. And so I was sitting here and just grinning to myself, because it felt like they were just speaking my experience. And I think that everybody who's in activism for the right reasons has that very similar experience. And it was really fun. And it's really fun for me to have this conversation and to hear those things. And I'm so happy. I'm actually really happy that we didn't just spend this whole stream talking about why I need to be protected. I'm actually really happy that we got to have like a really good, genuine heart-to-heart communication, heart-to-heart talk. And I'm happy I know a lot of people in the audience have been touched by how genuine all of the sentiments expressed here are. And so I want to say thank you, because you actually let me finish this stream on a note that just isn't all about my dire situation, but actually about the really beautiful development of our activism team and the things that we've been doing together, and how precious that is and how amazingly it's been blossoming. So thank you for that.
I think take it away, Christy and Taylor.
Yep, take it away.
So I want to thank, of course, all of the guests for coming on this evening and being willing to share their personal experiences with all of us. There was a lot of work that, of course, went into this stream, without a doubt. And like Suzie was saying, there are so many people behind the scenes that Christy and I are working with who you don't see on these streams, but are doing such awesome work. I'm, again, grateful to be a part of this, and very grateful to have met Suzie and to be the spokesperson for the 1 versus 5 I campaign, and to be lucky enough to be mentored by her and receive advice from her. It's been the best advice I've ever gotten professionally. I truly mean that. I consider myself so lucky. And again, I know we want to end off on the note we were, just on, talking about our community that we've kind of built, but also too, guys, this was all about a website that we created. If you want to learn more about this, and if you want to help out, and if you want to become an activist yourself, if what you heard, all of us talk about really resonates with you, join our movements. And again, we have the new website, protectsuzie.com. Please do check it out. And I also encourage you to check out Suzie's work. If you haven't read her articles, if you haven't watched the Decipher You series, please do. It is information you will not find anywhere else. So not only is Suzie a fantastic journalist and activist who writes incredibly well, I remember, early on, after I read her articles, I was left like almost, I don't know how to explain it, this feeling of like being overwhelmed, but in like a really good way. The writing is beautiful. But in addition to that, it's not just that about her. She truly cares about people and has taken so many people under her wing and has provided us with great advice. And again, I'm so grateful for that. I know I've said that a million times, but I want to thank everybody who also watched this evening, who joined us, and who was a part of this stream, everybody behind the scenes. And also Christy Doff, somebody who has become a great friend of mine. I'm really grateful for our friendship and that I was able to share this experience with you and co-host with you this evening.
Well, I just want to reiterate that please visit the website. That, the main reason why we're here tonight, the protectsuzie.com. It is an amazing website with so much information. I encourage you to read the open letter and sign as soon as you can, and donate if you are able. I just want to say that I've always just sort of been floored that Suzie saw the light in me and helped me become the activist I am today, and all the women I have worked with and all the activists I have worked with along the way. And I am just really honored to be part of the stream, and to continuing being part of Suzie's movements, and to be here tonight to help protect Suzie, because like Graham said, if this can happen to Suzie, this can happen to any of us. And we really have to stand up for each other in the face of this empire of surveillance that targets us and comes after us. And I really just encourage everybody to go to the website and get involved in any way, shape, or form that calls to you, because we have a lot of work to do, and there are more of us than there are of them. And I think that I like the way Graham said that tonight. And I just want to thank all the guests tonight, and thank you all in the chat, and thank you all for watching. I know we were streaming on a few different platforms tonight, so we didn't get to see all the comments, but it really means a lot to Suzie and the whole team that we have so many people supporting and encouraging her along the way.
Well, Finbar's going to say goodnight. He's going to.
So cute.
I feel like I've done so much smiling that like my cheeks are actually starting to hurt. Maybe I just like popped a wrinkle or two, possibly. I may have aged in the stream.
You need to get a derma roller. Do you know what that is?
Well,
I'll tell you. It's a roller with like 0.25 millimeter needles on it, and it makes you make more collagen in your face. Anyway,
I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get.
Beauty tips and politics. I think that's what I'm going to call my podcast. Beauty tips and politics. Anyway, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Thank you, and thank you for being here.